Chapter 386. Bang. On the golden stairs of the Sanjin Tower, the monster that was still moving at a high speed suddenly burst into a cloud of blood mist without warning, staining the stairs with a touch of bright red. The green-robed elder was counterattacked, and his complexion changed slightly. He forcibly swallowed the blood that rushed into his throat, and the smile on his face immediately disappeared. What happened? Why did the puppet explode? Everyone was shocked and doubtful. No one saw clearly how the puppet of the green-robed elder died. Only Heaven Rover's eyes flashed with an expression that it was true. Except for Su Li, who was sensitive, no one noticed his change. He slowly stood up and analyzed in a deep voice. Although I don't know if Tsang Lei was powerful in the ancient cultivation era, this is the inheritance cave of an ancient cultivator after all. It's not realistic if he can easily pass the first test. The green-robed elder calmed down when he heard the words. He snorted and sat down beside him. He said coldly, "A puppet is nothing, but it makes my pneuma and blood unstable. I need to tease it. Since everyone has a chance to try, those who are interested might as well go and have a try." After that, he closed his eyes and adjusted his breath, regardless of other people's reaction. After he calmed down, he even had a hint of complacency in his heart. He manipulated the puppet to pass the level instead of going in person. That was to say, every time he went there, he was an independent individual. If he could really take advantage of this loophole, as long as he had enough puppets, he could keep trying. Compared with others who only had one chance, the probability of passing the level was much higher. However, there were too many people at this moment. If he tried in front of everyone, it might cause others to be jealous and attack him together. He made up his mind that he would come back to test his conjecture when others tried other levels. Regardless of what the green-robed elder was thinking, the atmosphere in the field became strange as he spoke. The inexplicable self-explosion of the puppet just happened not long ago. Before they figured out the reason, how dare they rashly go up? After all, they only had one life. Heh, what a bunch of cowards. How can you walk further on the path of cultivation if you are so timid? The tall, thin man suddenly laughed mockingly, revealing a mouthful of sinister white teeth. The expression of Yuan, who had the worst temper, immediately changed. He was about to curse, but before he could say anything, the tall, thin man turned into an arc of light and dashed up the golden stairs of the three golden pagoda. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had surpassed the speed of the original puppet. Moreover, he was not injured at all, and continued to move forward at a high speed. Seeing this scene, many people suddenly changed their expressions. Even Heaven Rover's eyes were slightly solemn, as if he had met the tall and thin man for the first time. This person is very strange. He is not from our Jiuzhou region. I just liked his speed before, so I invited him. Does anyone know his background? Heaven Rover secretly transmitted the sound, but no one responded. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, but he didn't show this emotion on his face. Su Li stood in the crowd inconspicuously. She tilted her head slightly, and a trace of profound meaning appeared in her eyes. This trip to the ancient cave dwelling seemed to be getting more and more interesting. Her eyes flickered slightly. She turned her head and naturally glanced at a bunch of strange combinations. It was a woman in purple who exuded a charming aura, and a cold-faced boy in white with white hair. She found that since entering the cave dwelling, everyone had spoken, except for these two people, who seemed to be mute, didn't say a word all the way. If she remembered correctly, these two people should be assigned to the 4th level by Heaven Rover. For the sake of an ancient inheritance, all sorts of monsters are coming out. Zhang Xian muttered. While Su Li's thoughts were tumbling in her mind, the tall and thin man had already stood at the top of the three golden pagoda. His calm face couldn't help showing a trace of joy at this moment. He got the reward for clearing the level. This thought emerged in everyone's mind. Driven by interests, many young practitioners who were envious immediately went up the stairs of the three golden pagoda. On the other hand, none of those old and shrewd practitioners in Yuaning realm moved. Seeing this scene, Wang Yu hesitated for a moment, and finally restrained the desire in her heart. Her strength was not speed. If nothing went wrong, the 6th level was her home field. Why should she fail miserably for the short-term interests in front of her? The tall and thin man's figure flashed down from the top of the three golden pagoda, and his expression had returned to indifference. At the same time, a few practitioners with low cultivation suddenly showed a look of horror before they went up 1/3 of the stairs. Before they could leave any last words, they suddenly exploded and died. The horrifying and bloody scene instantly made the remaining young practitioners who wanted to go up shiver and feel cold all over. The tall and thin man sneered unabashedly when he saw this. Do you really think that anyone can get the reward of immortal Tsang Lei? Stupid. It seemed very easy for him to rush up the tower, but no one knew that he had secretly used several trump cards on the way. The loss was definitely worth it to get that thing. Do you still want to try? Heaven Rover smiled kindly and glanced at the rest of the people. But he didn't feel embarrassed when he didn't get any response. He pointed to the direction on the stone tablet that appeared out of nowhere and said, "Since no one has tried again, let's go to the second level." Fellow practitioner Heaven, you seem to know too much about this ancient cave, don't you? After adjusting his breath, the green-robed elder opened his eyes and stared at Heaven Rover with a gloomy smile. He didn't believe that he could know the detailed test of every level in the ancient cave in advance just by consulting the classics. Hearing this, Heaven Rover still looked calm. He shook his head and said with a smile, "It seems that fellow practitioner one is not going to leave this level?" The green-robed elder was shocked. In this sentence, Heaven Rover clearly pointed out that he had seen through his purpose and used it as a threat. But he couldn't say it out loud to confuse the doubts in his heart. I know my own ability, and I only have some advantages in speed. Since I have to gamble with my life to pass the level, why should I go to the other 5 levels to die? He vaguely explained his previous doubts. Heaven Rover smiled slightly and didn't pursue it. He nodded and said, "Since fellow practitioner one has made up his mind, I can't persuade you anymore." After saying that, he really didn't look at the green-robed elder and left with the rest of the practitioners. Seeing this scene, several young people who had followed the green-robed elder hesitated for a moment and finally followed Heaven Rover's pace with their teeth clenched. It was a chance to reach the heavens in one step. How could they be willing to give it up? The green-robed elder was eager to do so. He was not angry at the betrayal of several young practitioners. In the cave of inheritance of such a level, practitioners who had not reached Jindan realm were like cannon fodder. He didn't need to be angry at a few dead people at all. However, Heaven Rover led the crowd to find the second level very easily according to the guidance. The process was incredibly easy, as if there was no other danger in this cave except for accepting the test. The second test steel. Seeing the steel of the same style, Yuan and others looked as usual, but each had their own ideas. Along the way, the guidance had clearly disappeared, but Heaven Rover led them here with ease. It seemed that he had been here many times. Old Lady Duhua, there is something wrong with Heaven Rover. We have to be careful, Yuan secretly transmitted the sound. Old Lady Duhua didn't look at him, but glanced at Dongfang Yi beside her, and then slowly transmitted the sound. I have cultivated for more than 3,000 years, and I have seen the world. I will not be plotted against by a junior. If there is something fishy, you and I can join hands. What Yuan wanted was the last sentence. Hearing this, he felt a little relieved and stopped transmitting his voice. The rest of the practitioners also communicated secretly. The team that was originally united to pass the test began to be divided from this moment on. While communicating, Heaven Rover had finished reading the content on the steel. Yuan Laogui's physical strength could be regarded as the top in the Yuanying realm. Although Old Lady Duhua was best at using poison, she had cultivated herself into the drought demon body in her early years, so her physical strength was not worse than Yuan Laogui's. As expected, the second level was a test of the physical strength. I will pass if I can hold on for 10 seconds after entering the bell. Yuan looked at the golden bell suspended on the altar behind the steel, with a smile on his old face. He strode to the altar and entered the scope of the bell without any hesitation. Clang! The melodious bell rang from the altar and stopped in everyone's ears. It contained an inexplicable beautiful melody, which made people involuntarily immersed in it. But Yuan, who was in the scope of the bell, changed his face. With a deep roar, his skin showed a black luster like iron and stone. Suppress. As he said this, Yuan's muscles, which were still shaking wildly, immediately quieted down. But this moment of silence did not last long, and the second bell rang. Ding! Even the people outside the scope of the bell couldn't help but feel their blood and qi boiling. Unsurprisingly, Yuan, who was under the bell, directly spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fainted. This big bell has a kind of effect of purifying the physical body. Su Li narrowed her eyes and looked at the big bell with a little more enthusiasm. Since she left Chuangxing Path, her physical body had not been improved for a long time. What a terrible golden bell! Looking at Yuan, who was spitting out blood, old Lady Duhua's eyes flashed a touch of solemnity and hesitation. If she went there, she would not be much better than Yuan. Su Li glanced at old Lady Duhua, who was full of fear, thoughtfully. It seemed that if one's physical body was not strong enough, he would only be seriously injured in the face of this big bell and could not enjoy the benefits of refining. On the altar, the ninth breath, Yuan reluctantly stuffed a healing elixir into his mouth and managed to suppress his injury. But he saw the ripples of the golden bell, and another bell sound was quickly brewing. His expression immediately turned into horror, and he wanted to rush out of the range of the golden bell. But before he took action, the terrible third bell rang, and in the blink of an eye, his physical body was shattered and annihilated in the nothingness, without leaving a trace of blood. Gudong. Chapter 387. Phew! Heaven Rover let out a long sigh and remained silent, as if he hadn't completely digested the unexpected death of Yuan in a short time. Old Lady Duhua also looked solemn and had no intention of going up to try the golden bell. Her physical body was almost the same as Yuan Laogui's. Even Yuan Laogui had lost his life carelessly. What was the point of her trying? Yuan's voice seemed to linger in her ears. In such a short time, such a big change happened. Even with thousands of years of experience, old Lady Duhua couldn't help but sigh at this moment. There were not many opportunities to witness the death of an old monster in Yuanying realm. I didn't expect the second level to be so dangerous. Heaven Rover's familiar voice sounded, and there was no lack of regret in his tone. Then he turned to old Lady Duhua and asked, "Fellow practitioner Yuan's death may be just an accident. The road of cultivation is difficult and dangerous. Maybe this level has different powers for different people. Would you like to have a try, fellow practitioner Duhua?" Hearing Heaven Rover's obviously provocative words, old Lady Duhua sneered in her heart. Heaven Rover, you really treat us as fools." But she looked helpless and shook her head. "It's not that I don't want to. In terms of physical body, I'm almost the same as fellow practitioner Yuan. Why should I go to court death?" "That's a pity," Heaven Rover sighed, looked at the stone tablet that didn't show the guidance of the next level, and continued hypocritically, "No one has passed the level, so there is no way to know the guidance of the next level. I can't let you go to court death. For now, I can only rely on my speculation and take one step at a time." "Ha!" Immortal Bingshu stood up and chuckled. "Fellow practitioner Heaven, don't be modest. Do whatever you want. Even if we can't find the next level, we will never put the blame on you. Senior Heaven, please take us to the third level." As soon as Immortal Bingshu said this, everyone immediately agreed, and even the old monsters in Yuanying realm nodded with a smile. No one showed their real thoughts on their faces. Didn't he see that Yuan just made a guess and was soon dead? Although it was not necessarily Heaven Rover who did it, it didn't prevent other practitioners from making associations. "Thank you, fellow Taoists. I didn't expect that at this time, everyone would still be willing to listen to this old man." Heaven Rover was moved. He flipped his palm, and a light flashed above his palm. Immediately, a black and white compass appeared in his hand. This plate is known as the treasure-seeking plate, and it possesses an unfathomable guiding effect. Whether or not we can find the next stage will depend on it. As he said, Heaven Rover injected the power of Yuanying into the compass. The pointer on the compass trembled and turned rapidly. It didn't take long for it to be fixed in a certain direction. Over there. With a flash of light in his eyes, Heaven Rover followed the direction of the compass without hesitation, and the others immediately followed him. Su Li looked at the aged back of Heaven Rover, and her eyes flickered. Others might not notice it, but at the moment when Heaven Rover cast the spell, she clearly sensed a fluctuation that was very similar to the divine thunder of Earth. The fluctuation lacked the heaviness of the divine thunder of Earth, but she was not sure which divine thunder of 5 elements it was. However, the only thing she could be sure of was that this Heaven Rover definitely had some unspeakable relationship with this cave of inheritance. On the desolate and boundless gloomy plain, everyone trekked for 5 days under the leadership of Heaven Rover before they finally saw the stone tablet. Heaven Rover's tense expression was visibly relaxed, and he said in a deep voice, "After wandering for a few days, I finally found a stone tablet." Gee. Before he finished speaking, Old Lady Duhua made a sound of surprise. She looked hesitant for a moment and said, "This seems to be not the 3rd stone tablet?" "What, not the 3rd level?" Everyone's face changed slightly. Heaven Rover seemed to have just noticed this, and he quickly looked at the stone tablet. But this made him laugh bitterly and explain, "Fellow practitioner Duhua is right. This is the 4th stone tablet, corresponding to the 4th level." He actually skipped the 3rd level? Wang Yu was a little incredulous. Anyone who knew a little about the Cave of Inheritance from antiquity times knew that the inheritance in ancient times was particularly strict. Those who accepted the test had to pass the level step by step according to the master of the cave, but now they were obviously led astray by Heaven Rover. Heaven Rover took out the compass and saw that the pointer on it pointed to the stone tablet in front of him motionlessly. He suddenly showed a helpless expression. "It seems that we have to skip the 3rd level and start from the 4th level." Fortunately, Senior Tsang Lei did not say that we need to take the test in order, so it is not cheating, and it should not trigger the punishment inhibition of the cave. As soon as he said this, a soft and charming voice suddenly sounded. It turned out that the seductive woman in purple who had never spoken finally spoke, but her tone was not friendly at all. "Senior Tian, it's easy for you to say that. The 4th stage is this servant's home ground. If we're talking about taking risks, it should be this servant. Senior wants to send this junior to his death with just a few words. Isn't that too much?" With the last light hum, a pink phantom seemed to flash through the nothingness. The young male practitioners with poor cultivation were immediately fascinated by it, and some even drooled. Their bodies reacted, showing their ugliness. "It's another powerful figure with an unknown origin." Wang Yu stood next to the seductive woman and couldn't help stepping back at this moment, with fear in her eyes. Before coming here, she thought that with her inherited means, even if her cultivation had not reached Yuaning realm, it was enough to deal with everything. But when she came here, she realized that there were too many capable people in the cultivation circle, and her means were nothing compared to this group of people. "Fellow practitioner Xian, don't be anxious." Heaven Rover chuckled. In the face of the seductive woman's question, he was not angry at all. "It's normal for you to be worried, but my guess has some basis, but it comes from ancient books. Even if I tell you, you probably won't believe it. If that's the case, this old man has a compromise." Speaking of this, Heaven Rover pointed to the stone tablet and continued, as the stone tablet said, "The 4th level is a test of the soul. In terms of the attainment of the soul, I am far inferior to fellow practitioner Xian Meiji and fellow practitioner Snowchild. But even if I can't pass the level, I think I can survive in the 4th level. As long as I can keep my life, it can prove that what I said before is true. At that time, fellow practitioner Xian and fellow practitioner Snow can attack the level. How about that?" Heaven Rover's words were reasonable and well-founded, and he was even ready to take risks. Xian Meiji couldn't find any loopholes, so she immediately looked a little relaxed and nodded. "Since Senior Tian has already put it this way, how can I not agree?" Heaven Rover laughed and looked at the white-haired boy in white with an inquiring look. The latter still remained silent, but after thinking about it he nodded slightly in response. With the affirmation of the two, Heaven Rover didn't hesitate and walked to the dark stone room on the altar of the 4th level without saying a word. In the blink of an eye, he entered the stone room. The next moment, the The black stone room distorted in everyone's horrified eyes and disappeared directly. The person who led the way suddenly disappeared. Even the old foxes of Yuanying realm, who had been calm all the time, couldn't help but change their expressions and look gloomy. That old thing couldn't have escaped, right? I've noticed something wrong with him for a long time. If I had known it, I would have stayed with Senior One and been closer to the exit. Now we have no sense of direction in this damn place. Will we be trapped here to death? In the inexplicably quiet atmosphere as time went by, a sense of panic slowly spread. Xian Meiji stared at the altar intently. She was neither angry nor went up to the altar. At this moment, Snow Child, who was like a sculpture, suddenly moved. His movement immediately attracted the attention of most old foxes of Yuanying realm, but when they saw that Snow Child just sat down and waited, they were speechless. Seeing this, Xian Meiji showed a trace of surprise in her eyes. She turned to smile and said, "Giggle, Brother Snow, it's so boring to sit alone. I'll come to accompany you." As she said, Xian Meiji actually twisted her waist and sat next to Snow Child, ignoring the disappeared black stone room, which made everyone confused. Su Li also sat down. But she was just in Lianqi realm on the surface, so no one noticed her action. The stone room is still there, but it is shrouded by a special force, which can't be sensed. This force is somewhat similar to the illusion I encountered in Chuangxing Path. The kind of power that turned from false to real was particularly impressive to Su Li, so she saw through the details of the altar at a glance. Heaven Rover obviously won't die so easily. I'd like to see what his purpose is after this play. Just as Su Li was secretly planning, Immortal Bingshu and others were also sensible people. Seeing the abnormal reactions of Xian Meiji and Snow Child, they all dispelled the idea of leaving and found a place to rest and wait quietly. Time passed slowly. When Su Li finished sorting out the last paragraph of the foundation chapter of Suiyu Tactics, the fourth altar finally responded. Boom! With a heavy muffled sound, the black stone room reappeared, and then everyone saw Heaven Rover, who turned into a gray shadow, escape from it. As soon as he landed, his face was slightly red, and he opened his mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood. Ahem! Covering his chest and coughing a few times, Heaven Rover's eyes flashed with a strong lingering fear, and he regretfully said, "The illusion of the fourth level is too terrible. I tried my best to stay awake and escape. If I were a little later, I'm afraid I would be lost in it." Illusion? The black stone room was full of illusions? Hearing what Heaven Rover said, many Yuanying realm old foxes' eyes flickered. Being able to get to this step, they all had treasures to protect their souls more or less, so they all had the same idea. Xian Meiji smiled, as if hundreds of flowers were blooming, extremely bright. Senior Tian is really decisive. Since Senior has already fulfilled his promise, I have to go and see how terrifying the illusion that Senior mentioned is. As she said, her beautiful and bright eyes turned to Snow Child. The latter's face did not change, and he directly returned to his original place to sit down to show his meaning. "You go." Xian Meiji covered her mouth and chuckled. "Brother Snow, you really know how to cherish the fairer sex at such a young age. I'll be back soon. I won't let you wait for 5 days." After that, Xian Meiji floated down to the altar and also entered the fourth level of the test. Chapter 388. Xian Meiji really didn't talk nonsense. Just 2 days later, the familiar seductive figure flashed out of the stone room that reappeared, and she was unscathed. Seeing this, everyone subconsciously looked at the stone tablet and saw the location of the 5th level shown on the stone tablet. Haha, fellow practitioner Xian is really powerful. I think you have already got the reward of this level? Heaven Rover said with relief and kindness, without any jealousy. Xian Meiji's charming eyes flashed, and she said with a soft smile, "Senior Heaven, why do you stare at me? I'm afraid that what I got is not half of the value of Brother Huang. 100 celestial stones. If Brother Huang is willing, I am willing to exchange the thing in my hand for 150 celestial stones. What do you think, Brother Huang?" As soon as Xian Meiji said this, The tall and thin man who had passed the first level suddenly changed his face and looked gloomy. After a moment of silence, he slowly spat out 3 words. "You want to die?" Xian Meiji showed a look of fear, but her eyes were full of playfulness, and her tone was a little more gloating. "Brother Huang is really terrible. I just want to make a deal. Since Brother Huang is unwilling, forget it." As she spoke, she glanced at others and saw that everyone else faintly showed eagerness and greed. She couldn't help but sneer in her heart. She thought that people didn't really want to make a deal with the tall and thin man. As long as a person passed the level, he could easily know the information of others who had passed the level, and the thing in her hand was also very precious. If it was revealed by Snow Child or those who had passed the 5th and 6th level, the situation would become extremely dangerous. In this case, she could only take the initiative. If the tall and thin man became the target of public criticism, her pressure would be much less. "Bitch, how dare you!" The tall and thin man realized his situation, and his eyes were cold. He turned around and fled without saying a word. So decisive. Xian Meiji was stunned, and her plan failed. Her beautiful face was a little ugly. Others also looked at the tall and thin man who disappeared in the distance and sighed with pity. No one expected that the tall and thin man would be so decisive and flee directly. In a hurry, he took the lead. With his speed, no one on the scene could catch up with him. Even Su Li asked herself that when it came to speed, she was only equal to him. Under the premise of falling behind, there was no possibility to catch up. 300 celestial stones. Su Li's eyes flickered. There were indeed celestial stones in this cave, but 300 was still too little for her to be interested. But Wang Yu couldn't help showing a trace of excitement on her face at this moment. Celestial stones. It's actually celestial stones. She, Wang Yu, got the inheritance by chance and was knowledgeable. Naturally, she knew the role of the celestial stone. It was a purer and milder practicing resource than the best spiritual stone. The pure spiritual energy made it easier to break the bottleneck. Wang, King of King, pure spiritual qi made it easier for people to break through bottlenecks. The value of each celestial crystal was more than 10,000 times that of a supreme-grade spiritual stone. Such a treasure was basically priceless and hard to come by. T celestial. Damn it. Why wasn't I the one who passed the first test? Meister. King saying, "Child, Wang Yu looked excited and full of regret. If she had known this, she would have tried the first level even if she had played all her cards. Well, since fellow practitioner Huang doesn't want to be with us, let's go our separate ways. Fellow Taoists, there's no need to be discouraged. We've only tried the 3rd trial. Once we've found the remaining 3 trials, you can try it out yourselves. If you do your best, there's bound to be one who'll get what he wants. If the rewards you receive aren't satisfactory, this old man can also guarantee that you'll be able to trade without any worries." The voice of Heaven Rover sounded at the right time, like a gentle spring flowing through the heart, soothing the irritable mood. Everyone's eyes were full of enthusiasm. Senior Tian is right. We have many opportunities. Senior Huang is so short-sighted to leave the team. Scoundrel, we don't want to be with him. When expressing their views on the tall and thin man, everyone had the same idea. Even Wang Yu couldn't help but criticize him, which made Heaven Rover look at her. After that, Snow Child entered the altar. Everyone waited for less than 2 days, and the white figure reappeared. Judging from the length of time, his strength was obviously above Xian Meiji. Back in the crowd, Snow Child was still expressionless. He only looked at Xian Meiji for a moment, and then looked at Heaven Rover. His words were extremely simple. The 5th level. Heaven Rover was stunned for a moment, and then began to lead the way. Since Snow Child didn't mean to mention the reward of Xian Meiji, he certainly couldn't ask. Xian Meiji breathed a sigh of relief when she saw this, but she didn't dare to relax completely. She had said before that what she got was worth 150 celestial stones. Now Huang Shan suddenly escaped, and Snow Child's strength was above her. It was hard to guarantee that no one else in the team would be interested in her. With the guidance, it was much easier for Heaven Rover to find the 5th level. After only half a day, he arrived at the place where the next stone tablet was. Unlike the previous two, the place to accept the test this time was not an altar, but a palace. After reading the contents of the stone tablet at a glance, Heaven Rover suddenly laughed and said loudly, "Everyone, we can all accept this test." As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Heaven Rover quickly explained the meaning of the stone tablet. This test is designed to test talent. We, the cultivators, go against the heaven. Without talent, we can't move a step forward. As a descendant of Tsang Lei, if your talent is not up to standard, even if you get my inherited practice method, you definitely can't practice it. So, if you can't get my recognition in this level, you will directly lose the qualification to inherit. I, Tsang Lei, have practiced for tens of thousands of years and collected countless practice methods. 3 million low-grade practice methods, 500,000 middle-grade practice methods, 180 top-grade practice methods, 3 top-grade practice methods, and 1 holy method of nature's punishment school. The conditions for practicing the holy method are extremely harsh. In order to select a suitable successor, I specially exchanged 3 top-grade practice methods for a simplified version of the holy method of nature's punishment school, which can also be called a pseudo-holy method. Whoever can master it will be qualified to take the next test and inherit the orthodoxy of Tsang Lei. When everyone heard what Heaven Rover said, they were all shocked. Even Snow Child, who had been silent, was no exception. My God! The top-grade holy method of the ancient cultivation era. What I'm practicing now is not even a top-grade practice method, let alone a top-grade practice method. There are 180 top-grade practice methods in this cave. How powerful were the ancient cultivators? Nature's punishment school? Are there many schools of ancient holy methods? Why haven't I heard of any of them? The fierce discussion made the palace as lively as a vegetable market in the blink of an eye. Heaven Rover did not stop them. He also stared at the stone tablet with fiery eyes. I've waited for this step for too long. The holy method of nature's punishment and the inheritance of immortal Tsang Lei can only be mine. Immortal Bingshu coughed violently twice, and an abnormal blush appeared on his sallow face, showing that he was extremely uncalm inside, and there was a trace of disbelief. Holy method? In this kind of remote Jiuzhou region, there is a school of holy method inheritance? It is clearly recorded in the classics of the sect that in ancient times, this area of Jiuzhou region was still a sea, and there was no human habitation at all. Are those records false? While falling into self-doubt, Immortal Bingshu's eyes were also shining. He was the top genius of the sect. In terms of talent and temperament, he was the strongest in the sect. He could definitely pass the 5th test and become one of the candidates for the inheritance of the cave. While being overwhelmed with emotions, Immortal Bingshu couldn't help but look at Heaven Rover with suspicion in his eyes. Was it a coincidence that he was arranged in the 5th test, or, junior sister apprentice, why are they all so excited as if they are possessed? What is the holy method? What mental method do we practice in Huajian sect? Jin Ying and Su Li were undoubtedly the calmest in the field now. The former was ignorant, while the latter didn't care. Su Li glanced at Jin Ying, whose eyes were full of curiosity. She thought for a moment and replied quite seriously, "The holy method should be a very powerful practice method. If I am not mistaken, the practice method we practice is at most the middle grade." So low. Jin Ying's little face frowned, and she immediately clenched her small fist and hummed, "Then I also want to practice the holy method." As soon as she said this, the young practitioners around suddenly let out a low laugh, but no one cared about a little girl like her. Su Li couldn't help smiling, and wondered what the holy method of nature's punishment school was. Not surprisingly, the so-called nature's punishment was probably the same as Chuangxing Path, which was a kind of ancient holy method of cultivation school. But now she couldn't contact Black Face, so she didn't know which school was stronger or weaker. However, she was sure of one thing. Tsang Lei, the owner of this cave, was by no means a nobody in ancient times. Just when everyone was still talking fiercely, a deep and heavy male voice suddenly came from the silent palace. This palace is used for practice by the examinees. Where the rush cushion is, the practice method will appear automatically. The time limit is 1 month. If you can get into the practice method, it will be given to you as a lucky chance. If you can't get into the practice method, I will also pick out the practice method as a reward according to the level of practice. There was a moment of silence in the palace and everyone was shocked. This? Immortal Tsang-Lei is still alive. It's impossible. The first stone tablet clearly says that Immortal Tsang-Lei is dead. Yes. Hearing someone refuting, Heaven Rover's eyebrows also relaxed. This palace may have the means left by Immortal Tsang-Lei, but it is not immortal. As soon as he finished speaking, rush cushions appeared everywhere in the palace, and the number was exactly the number of people who entered the palace at this moment. The practitioners who were still looking for rush cushions immediately stopped, and their eyes showed urgency. Everyone. Chapter 389. I didn't expect that even 2 little girls in Lianqi realm who know nothing have futons. When Su Li sat down, she clearly heard the whisper of a young practitioner behind her, but Jining didn't feel it. She excitedly began to communicate with the practice method in the futon and slowly immersed herself in it. 1 month was very tight, and no one wanted to waste it. Soon, except for Su Li who was still awake in the entire hall, everyone else entered the state of meditation. Su Li evoked a trace of psychic awareness and probed into the futon. It didn't take long for a pseudo-holy method with thousands of ancient characters to appear in her mind. Although they were ancient characters, there was a special power in the characters. Even if she didn't know the characters, she could understand the meaning. Obviously, Tsang-Lei also considered the changes of the characters with the changes of the times, so he used this way to convey information. It's a little interesting. This pseudo-holy method is indeed much better than the current practice method. But I have the holy method of Sueyu tactics, so it's quite boring for me to read the pseudo-holy method. After reading the whole mental method, Su Li was quite helpless. She thought that she could get another mental method that could be verified with Sueyu tactics, but from the pseudo-holy method, she could see the whole picture. The so-called nature's punishment holy method was probably far inferior to Sueyu tactics. However, after all, it is a school of holy method. Even if I don't practice it, I can give it to Master and Jining. As the thought flashed through her mind, Su Li reluctantly prepared to practice the pseudo-holy method. But this pseudo-holy method is too simple. 3 days are enough for me to get started. The first 27 days will be used to comprehend Sueyu tactics. After making up her mind, Su Li no longer cared about the pseudo-holy method and immersed herself in the comprehension of Sueyu tactics. She was also comprehending the mental method. From the outside, she was no different from others, so she didn't have to worry about being exposed. While the group of people were still practicing in the ancient cave, far away in Huajian sect, the 1-month period agreed by Beishao Liang and the protector elder of Yushu sect had arrived. Elder, hasn't Wang Yu done anything yet? Beishao Liang frowned and hadn't relaxed in the past few days. Indeed, how can I mistake the Pneuma of Hongyu? She has been staying in her bedroom, and her Pneuma is faint. It's very likely that she is practicing in isolation. The law protector elder spoke in a deep voice. Forcibly disturbing the seclusion of others is a taboo in the cultivation world. You don't want to fall out with Huajian sect. I think it's better to give it a long thought. You should go back to the sect to practice and improve your strength first. When you become a practitioner of Yuanying realm or even a higher level, Wang Yu will be a piece of cake. How can you be constrained? Beishao Liang was silent for a moment and finally sighed. He understood that the protector elder was right, but he hadn't gotten his revenge, and the anger in his heart hadn't been quelled. How could he cultivate in peace? No matter how high her cultivation was, she couldn't cover the whole Qingshui circle. At that time, as long as Wang Yu left Jiuzhou region, who could find her? Seeing Beishao Liang hesitating, the elder of protector shook his head secretly. When he was about to speak again, the alarm suddenly rang in Huajian sect. Clang, ding, ding. The hasty bell immediately made Beishao Liang stand up in shock. He said to himself incredulously, "Is someone attacking the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect?" The protector elder also stood up slowly with a solemn look. Through the big tactical matrix, he could clearly feel that there was more than one practitioner of Yuanying realm bombarding outside the tactical matrix. Why did a small Huajian sect attract such a strong enemy? Is it possible that our Yushu sect is the enemy, and Bei Shaoliang's whereabouts have been leaked? The protector elder thought for a while, but Bei Shaoliang flew out of the palace to Li Guang's palace without saying a word. Boom! Boom! The sound of bombarding the big tactical matrix was getting louder and louder. The disciples of Huajian sect had never suffered such an attack. Some young disciples immediately ran out in a hurry and looked at the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect, changing color in the sky with pale faces. Who dares to make trouble in my Huajian sect? Before the third bombardment fell, a white rainbow shot out of the main peak and stopped steadily at the edge of the big tactical matrix. An old man in a white robe appeared. It's the first elder. The first elder came out. Many low-level disciples were shocked, but the old man called the first elder didn't look good when he saw a group of people coming aggressively in the tactical matrix. There were 9 people in total, all of whom were above Jindan realm. He couldn't sense the pneuma of 2 of them. Only the practitioners of Yuanying realm couldn't be sensed by him at the peak of Jindan realm. Headmaster has broken through, but she alone can't deal with 2 practitioners of Yuanying realm. Thinking of this, the first elder sneered coldly, I don't know which 2 seniors have come to bombard the tactical matrix of our sect without saying a word. Do they fancy this barren land? The leading purple-robed elder looked gloomy. Hearing that the first elder's tone was not respectful at all, his eyes became colder. He took a step forward and introduced himself word by word. I'm Yu Wu Tao, the elder of Zihan sect. The elder of Zihan sect, the second sect in Zhezhou region? The first elder's pupils suddenly shrank. He didn't expect that the background of these people was so horrible. But the people outside the tactical matrix still seemed to feel that this deterrent effect was not enough. Another white-robed elder of Yuanying realm also stood out, narrowed his eyes and said, I'm Su Huabin, the director of Su family. Su family? Another behemoth comparable to the 25 sects. The first elder's face was stiff, and his heart thumped. Why did the leaders of these 2 big forces come to the door on the same day? Your Huajian sect is really good. Yu Wu Tao stared at the first elder with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. Not only immortal Hong Yu who breaks her promise, but also the headmaster is so influential. You are the only elder who comes to receive us. How arrogant you are. Damn it. As he said, he turned over his hands with 2 swords in his hands, and continued to bombard the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect without hesitation. He could easily break the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect of a small sect. The first elder's heart sank, but he didn't panic when he saw Yu Wu Tao continue to attack. The tactical matrix of Huajian sect was personally arranged by that person, and it was not easy for those in Yuanying realm to break it. On top of that, the first elder's face relaxed slightly and he regained his calmness. Su Huabin frowned when he saw this, and felt that something was wrong. Did Huajian sect have any trump card? While he was wondering, a cold and unpleasant voice suddenly sounded from the hall of the main peak of Huajian sect, and spread throughout Huajian sect in the blink of an eye. Many old people who had stayed in Huajian sect for hundreds of years heard this voice, and immediately couldn't help but get excited. Although the disciples who had been in the sect for less than 100 years had never heard the voice, they quickly reacted when they saw the reactions of the senior fellow apprentices and uncle masters around them. They stared at the sky above the sect with expectation. When Yu Wu Tao and First Elder heard this voice, their faces changed slightly. Then they saw a purple phantom floating out from the top of the main peak. After a few flashes, it appeared beside the First Elder and stood in the air. Headmaster. The First Elder showed reverence on his face and hurriedly saluted. Su Huabin was slightly stunned, and his eyes showed surprise. He hadn't paid attention to Huajian sect before, so he didn't know that the headmaster of Huajian sect was a female practitioner. Yu Wu Tao was much calmer. He took a deep look at the beautiful face, which seemed to be the same as 1,000 years ago. His heart sank slightly, and he couldn't help but sneer. I didn't expect that Hua Yan, the talent in those days, has come to this point. It really surprises me. Hua Yan smiled and said calmly in the face of the two old guys who had been immersed in Yuanying realm for many years, I used to be on the Tianjiao list in Jiuzhou region. If I don't break through Yuanying realm, won't I be defeated by ordinary practitioners like you? Hua Yan's words were sarcastic, and Yu Wutao's face changed slightly. Before he could retort, the former turned her eyes again and said to the butler of Su family, "The butler of Su family comes at the right time. A few days ago, Su Zini, the seventh holy girl of your family, tried to break into the sect to assassinate me, but was killed by me. She only has a half-step to Yuanying realm with her, and she dares to come to my Huajian sect to make trouble. Doesn't she look down on my Huajian sect?" When Su Huabin heard this, his anxious mood immediately calmed down, and he nodded with a smile. "It turns out that the seventh miss of my family really died in your sect. Thank you for telling me the truth, Headmaster Hua. You really helped me a lot." Hearing the softening in Su Huabin's words, Yu Wutao's eyes widened slightly, and he was about to ask by sound transmission. However, Su Huabin waved his hand and continued with a smile, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. I will kill 3,000 disciples of Naiman branch and 1,000 inherited disciples of your sect in return. What do you think, Headmaster Hua?" As soon as this remark came out, Hua Yan's smiling face immediately became cold, and a green jade flower appeared in her palm. "If you want to kill my people, ask me first." Star-stacked tactical matrix was invincible, but Huajian's sect didn't have so many spiritual stones to consume. If Yu Wutao and others attacked wantonly, it wouldn't take long for the energy of the entire tactical matrix to be cut off, and then it would collapse. At that time, many weak disciples of the sect would die, and the whole sect would be in danger of being destroyed. This kind of situation must not happen. Hua Yan gritted her teeth and was about to rush out of the tactical matrix, and First Elder and others also followed her with dignified faces. But at this moment, a long laugh came from Fujian Mount, and then Yu Wutao and others saw Beishao Liang coming on a sword, followed by a cold-faced old man, whose pneuma couldn't be detected. Another practitioner of Yuanying realm? Yu Wutao's eyes almost popped out. Wasn't Huajian's sect a low-grade sect? Why did two practitioners of Yuanying realm suddenly pop out? What kind of low-grade sect was this? You are Beishao Liang, the holy son of Yushu sect? Su Huabin suddenly looked horrified and asked in surprise. After all, he was the general manager of Su family, and his status was far above Yu Wutao's. He knew almost all the talents of the major sections. Beishao Liang was the recently promoted holy son of Yushu sect, and he recognized him at a glance. As soon as Su Huabin said this, everyone was shocked, and everyone's eyes focused on Beishao Liang. For a moment, the tense atmosphere actually eased. Chapter 390. Nephew Bei, you are wrong. Since Huajian sect is under your protection, we will not offend you. We will leave now. Su Huabin winked at Yu Wutao, who was unwilling to leave, and turned to leave without saying a word. Not to mention Yu Wutao, even Hua Yan and Beishao Liang, who had revealed their identity, did not expect this decisiveness. Yu Wutao's heart was full of resentment, but without Su Huabin's help, he couldn't stay. Seeing Su Huabin walking away, he could only snort and leave angrily. This Su family's chief steward is still as shameless as he was back then. The crisis receded, and Hua Yan seemed to think of something in the past. She narrowed her eyes and sighed softly. Beishao Liang frowned and remained silent. Su family and Zihan sect had a close relationship, and their attitude towards Yushu sect was very strange. He didn't think that he scared Su Huabin away. "It's not that simple," he muttered to himself, and didn't mention Wang Yu to Hua Yan for a while. He still cared about the survival of Huajian sect. After Yu Wutao left, he quickly caught up with Su Huabin, who deliberately slowed down. He asked with an ugly face, "Butler Su, what do you mean? You and I have a deal." "Elder Yu, calm down." Su Huabin interrupted Yu Wutao with a smile and lowered his voice. "Huajian sect is not as simple as you think. Even if Hua Yan is the only one supporting, we may not be able to break through the tactical matrix for protecting the sect, let alone now there are two, As soon as this was said, Yu Wutao was stunned, and then his face was full of disbelief. He shook his head and said, "It's just a small sect. How strong can the tactical matrix for protecting the sect be? If we bombard it together, it will be destroyed in less than a minute." Su Huabin scolded Yu Wutao for being stupid in his heart. He had already said so, but Yu Wutao still didn't understand the meaning. But on the surface, he still explained the origin of the tactical matrix of Huajian's sect to Yu Wutao carefully with a gentle smile. After listening, Yu Wutao immediately stopped talking. After all, he came from the era of Holy Girl Su. How could he not know such an evil means? But he didn't expect that a small sect should have such a background. Would the revenge of his granddaughter Yu Lin be left unsettled? Su Huabin looked at Elder Yu's unwilling expression and knew that the time had come. He smiled and said, "Elder Yu, even if we retreat today, it does not mean that we will let this matter rest." Elder Yu's eyes lit up. "Chief Steward Su, are you saying, Su Zini is the seventh miss of the Su family after all? It's not so easy to let go of this debt. This time, I'm here to investigate the cause of seventh young mistress death. Once I return to the clan and report to the clan, the victim's family will naturally come knocking on my door. When that time comes, Elder Yu will come forth to assist us. Wouldn't that be killing two birds with one stone? Good. That's great." Elder Yu laughed loudly. With the help of the seniors of Su family, no matter what tricks Huajian sect plays, they can't escape the fate of annihilation. Then this old man will wait for Chief Steward Su's good news in the Zihan sect. After some discussion, the two of them went their separate ways. Although Hua Yen and Beishao Liang felt that this matter was strange, they didn't know that the danger of the destruction of the sect was approaching. The sect had returned to its usual peace. For cultivators, a month's time was but a fleeting moment. In the blink of an eye, the appointed time for the fifth test in the Manor of Inheritance's main hall had arrived. Swish! All the futons disappeared at the same time, and the practitioners who were still immersed in the Enlightenment were immediately awakened. After checking the progress of their practice, almost 80% of them looked gloomy at the same time, while the other 20% who were more scheming were expressionless, and no one could tell whether they were happy or angry. Jean Ying looked dejected. She didn't even sort out the whole mental method of the pseudo-holy method in a month, let alone pass the threshold. Now that the time was up, the memory of the holy method was erased again, and her hard work for this month was in vain. 3 people passed. The voice within the palace rang out once more. Hearing that only 3 people had entered, the young cultivators who had failed all felt a little better in their hearts. It must be known that there were more than 10 Dao Masters and nascent soul old monsters present. There are 5 Yuanying realm practitioners, but only 3 people passed. Even such a powerful existence can't pass the threshold, so it's normal that we can't practice. The young practitioners with low cultivation adjusted their mentality and immediately walked out of their disappointment. Looking at the Yuanying realm practitioners with different expressions, they actually felt that they were watching a play. 3 people, besides me, there are 2 more people who passed the threshold. Heaven Rover looked calm on the surface, but he was shocked and angry in his heart. He was determined to get this cave. He thought that it would be easy to use these Yuanying realm practitioners to get the inheritance, but he didn't expect that it would become a situation where he led a wolf into the house. I have practiced for 100 years to pass the threshold. Which 2 bastards took only 1 month to pass the threshold, and they are so talented. He glanced at the other Yuanying realm practitioners, but he didn't get much information. These people were all old and shrewd, and they wouldn't show the change of their mood on their faces. At this moment, he even had an impulse to kill all of them on the spot, but the 6th and 2nd levels had not been passed yet. He could only deal with one of them at most, and the rest would be left to the 3rd level. These people couldn't die for the time being. Forget it, wait a little longer. When the 6th level is passed, these people will almost die without me doing anything. With a sneer in his heart, Heaven Rover took a deep breath and restrained his thoughts again. Just when Heaven Rover was struggling, all the practitioners who had not passed the threshold received the 1st level of reward. 30%, the mental method of the upper grade? It's actually the upper grade mental method. The mental method I practiced before was not even the middle grade. Many people were overjoyed, and the reward given by the palace obviously exceeded everyone's expectations. 60%, the top practice method. It's not bad. Dongfang Yi was overjoyed. The practice method of the Dongfang family was just at the upper grade. Although he couldn't become the inheritor now, it was a great gain to get a top practice method. Old Lady Du Huan naturally saw that Dongfang Yi got a good mental method, but he reacted at this time, which proved that he was not the one who passed the threshold. Along the way, this kid is very scheming, and he is by no means pretending. It seems that only the 10 people selected by Heaven Rover will pass the threshold, and even Heaven Rover himself. Old Lady Du Hua thought very quickly, but no matter how she guessed, she could never guess that the third person who passed the threshold would be the sacrifice brought by Wang Yu. Su Li looked inside her body and helplessly looked at the genuine qi of the pseudo-holy method that was suppressed under her pubic region as soon as she practiced it. This was the result of her deliberate control, otherwise this wisp of genuine qi would have been swallowed by Sueyu tactics. Although the genuine qi is weak, it is the same as the pneuma in the jade token of divine thunder of earth. I wonder what will happen if I mobilize this wisp of genuine qi and inject it into the jade token? Su Li thought about it, and at the same time, Heaven Rover had led everyone to the last level, the 6th level. This level is to test the power of the tactical restriction. 2 days later, Heaven Rover stood in front of the 6th stone tablet and said loudly, "In ancient cultivation, the tactical restriction was as important as the cultivation. After every practitioner's foundation was consolidated, he needed to learn the tactical restriction in order to excavate the relics of more ancient times. So, in the 6th level, I must test your cultivation of the tactical restriction. If you can break the tactical restriction of one level, you will pass. If you can break the tactical restriction of one level, all the treasures stored in the 6th level will be given to you." After Heaven Rover explained the content of the 6th level, there was a burst of heated discussion among the crowd. The tactical restriction is actually a test of the tactical restriction. I am a 3rd grade tactical matrix master of Junlo Group, and I must try this level. How can the tactical restriction be compared with the tactical restriction? And judging from the last level, it is obvious that the tactical restriction is more sophisticated, but the current tactical restriction of the cultivation circle is just some small tricks that look good but are useless. Is the tactical restriction of the ancient times different? Whether it is the same or different, we will know after trying it. After a while of heated discussion, someone couldn't hold back his desire and rushed into the stone gate of the tactical restriction test. He is still sensible and didn't go to the stone gate of the restriction. As soon as this thought flashed through Su Li's mind, she was shocked to see the young practitioner who claimed to be a 3rd grade tactical matrix master just now rushed into the gate of the restriction very recklessly. The ignorant are fearless. How can the tactical restriction of the ancient tactical restriction be compared with the current tactical restriction? Heaven Rover and Su Li almost laughed in their hearts at the same time. They didn't know how Heaven Rover knew about the tactical restriction for the time being, but Su Li had been despised by Black Lotus because she used the tactical restriction, so he gave her a lesson about the tactical restriction of the ancient times. In the ancient cultivation era mentioned by Black Lotus, although the word tactical was first in the tactical restriction, it was just a relatively low-level universal trick. Tactical restriction. It was the all-encompassing and powerful crafty skill of that era. Its functions ranged from the small tactical restriction for daily use to the horrible tactical restriction that could destroy the world and destroy the mountains and rivers. Now that Song Lei used the tactical restriction as a test, it would never be a useless tactical restriction. It was very likely to be the killing restriction. If Black Lotus were here and heard Su Li's analysis, he would definitely drool and shout that he had made a fortune. Every incantation of the killing restriction was extremely rare. Now there was an ownerless killing restriction in the Cave of Inheritance. If he could sense it, he might be able to deduce the incantation of the killing restriction and make a big harvest. Unfortunately, the sensing of Black Lotus Ring had long been isolated, and he couldn't even manifest it. Tactical restriction. Wang Yu looked at the stone door of the tactical restriction that was temporarily occupied, and her heart was surging. Others needed to have a high level of tactical restriction to break the tactical restriction, but she was different. As a spell practitioner, as long as there are enough sacrifices, I can break the tactical restriction no matter what level it is. She looked at the two little girls who were unscathed all the way, and almost laughed out loud. With these two girls, she could try to break the tactical restriction, and then all the treasures in the 6th level would be hers. Haha. Fan Zisung, my good disciple, I really don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for your contribution of the flower pond, how could I get such 2 perfect sacrifices? In this way, the countercharge is only 10% of the usual, and my ability to break the tactical restriction should reach the master level. Sensing Wang Yu's scorching gaze, Su Li raised her eyebrows imperceptibly, and a smile appeared on her lips. Chapter 391. Ah! Ah! Following 2 hurried and short screams from the 2 doors, the 6th checkpoint once again entered an empty state. Bright red blood flowed along the cracks under the stone gate with bone powder. It was like mercury without staining the ground at all. In the blink of an eye, all the blood blended into the ground, as if the tragic death of the 2 people was just an illusion. They were crushed into blood powder. Many people were horrified and woke up from the state of excitement. They finally remembered that the test level was not only an opportunity, but also a danger of death. Senior! When everyone was silent, Wang Yu stood up confidently and said to Heaven Rover with her fists cupped, "It's enough for me to pass this test. The 30% gain that I said before is still valid." After that, she no longer looked at Heaven Rover's meaningful eyes, and strode to the stone gate of the test with Jin Ying and Su Li, who looked confused. Wang Yu is clearly in Jindan realm, but she can be invited by Heaven Rover in person. What special ability does she have to break the tactical matrix? Old Lady Duhua pondered, but Dong Feng Yi's face changed slightly. Why did this female senior take 2 little girls in Lianqi realm to break the test? Could it be? Old Lady. As soon as he was about to ask, he saw that Old Lady Duhua's face also changed slightly. He couldn't help but look up and saw Wang Yu and the other 2 enter the stone gate of the restriction. This? Dong Feng Yi's eyes widened. Old Lady Duhua's expression returned to calm, but her sigh sounded from the sound transmission. You want to save those 2 girls? Not to mention that others don't agree. Even now, it's too late. Dong Feng Yi's face turned pale, and countless cruel scenes flashed through his mind. He clenched his fists for a long time, and finally put them down powerlessly. If I can also have the strength of Yuanying realm. At this moment, he finally realized what his father said in his childhood, as a practitioner, if you don't have enough strength, everything is in vain. After Wang Yu and the other 2 entered the stone gate of the restriction, they passed through an ordinary tunnel and finally came to a stone with a radius of less than 30 meters. The stone surface was engraved with complex black runes. Wang Yu glanced at it roughly, but couldn't recognize any of them. Is this the ancient restriction? As expected, it is completely different from the current restrictions. Wang Yu didn't panic at all. With a smile on her face, she looked at Su Li standing beside her, and her eyes gradually became fierce. Suddenly, she used her fingers as a sword and cut Su Li's wrist fiercely. In a split second, blood splattered across the sky, and the rich red landed on the black rune restriction. After Su Li screamed in pain, she didn't do anything else. She let the blood flow into the inhibition and gradually filled the entire rune of the inhibition. This was the proper reaction of being enchanted. Junior sister. Jin Ying forgot Su Li's instructions. Her face changed slightly and she was about to rush to Su Li, but Wang Yu knocked her out and threw her aside. If it weren't for the fact that you've been rather close to me along the way, my first target would have been you. Wang Yu smiled coldly with no expression on her face. She slowly performed the spell practice. She didn't know to what extent the enchantment given by Immortal Bingshu would work, so even if Jin Ying showed abnormalities, she didn't care much, and focused on breaking the restriction. To be on the safe side, she also cast a paralysis spell on Su Li, making her body stiff and unable to move so that she could take blood. The ancient restriction must not be underestimated. So, I will use the third-grade spell. The countercharge will at most make my cultivation drop to the middle stage of Jindan realm. This loss is absolutely worth it. Wang Yu pondered and pinched out several skull marks in her hands. They were connected together like a net made of skulls, which became more and more complicated. She was concentrating on condensing the spell, so she didn't notice that Su Li, who should have been stiff and bleeding to death, suddenly moved. She took back her hand first and wiped her wrist with a finger. In the blink of an eye, the wound disappeared. Then she turned around and stood in front of Wang Yu, looking at her with a smile. Seeming to feel the gaze, Wang Yu felt a little uncomfortable. Although she didn't want to interrupt her thoughts, she still opened her eyes to have a look. What she saw scared her out of her wits. Su Yu. Wang Yu screamed in horror, and her voice changed with fear. Why are you awake? You can move. Seeing the intact skin on her wrist, she couldn't help but be shocked. For a moment, the skull net became blurred and unstable, and was about to disperse. Forcibly stabilizing the spell, Wang Yu anxiously thought of a way to save her, but she heard the young girl in front of her suddenly laugh. Master, you should be very flustered now, right? I'm afraid the countercharge of the interruption of the spell is much more costly than the success of your spell. Wang Yu's pupils shrank violently, but this time she didn't scream again. After all, she was a person who had practiced for thousands of years, so she quickly recovered her calmness. While thinking, she spoke to stall for time. This Su Yu was so weird that she couldn't bring up any resistance for a while, and just wanted to escape. Your Excellency, since you even know the spell, why do you hide your identity in Dansha Mount? What I did before did offend you, but if you had told me in advance, there would have been no such misunderstanding. Su Li's little face showed surprise when she heard the words, and her expression also eased. It seemed that she was really persuaded by Wang Yu. Wang Yu secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and the gesture was completed faster. That's right. She didn't mean to cut off the spell. The spell was also a skill to hurt people. Even if Su Yu was weird and couldn't completely treat her as a sacrifice, as long as the spell was cast, Su Yu would be seriously injured even if she didn't die. Thinking of this, she smiled coldly and continued to deal with Su Li on the surface. Su Li didn't seem to notice it and slowly chatted with Wang Yu. Finally, after a cup of tea's time, the gesture of the spell reached the final stage. It's done! Wang Yu was delighted and was about to pinch the last seal. Su Li's unhurried voice suddenly became cold and mocking. After talking so much, I almost forgot to remind you what the absolute premise of the spell is. Senior, you should not forget it, right? As soon as the words came out, Wang Yu's eyes suddenly widened, and her body shook violently like a sieve. How could she forget it? To cast the spell, the strength of the sacrifice must be far less than that of the caster. Otherwise the caster would inevitably suffer a terrible backfire. Su Yu had always shown that she was in Lianqi realm, but she completely ignored this detail. No! Seeing that her fingers pinched the seal due to inertia, Wang Yu let out a desperate scream, but it was too late. Boom! An absolute scale phantom emerged and flipped between Su Li and Wang Yu. In just a breath, the scale completely tilted to Su Li, as if the weird existence that weighed the sacrifice didn't need to think at all. How could there be such a big difference? Wang Yu's face was pale, and her lips trembled as she wanted to say something to Su Li. The next moment, the raging backfire hit her, and with a burst of crackling, her bones were crushed in an instant, followed by her flesh and skin. When she became a mass of minced meat, a white flame appeared out of thin air and burned everything into nothingness. Su Li watched this scene calmly, and her expression was slightly gloomy. Wang Yu's soul was clearly gone, and her bones were gone, which was similar to her fate in her previous life. Without the Black Lotus ring, where would I be now? A slightly absurd thought flashed in her mind. Su Li shook her head, picked up Wang Yu's universe ring, and walked to the front of the inhibition. Looking at the runes of the inhibition that had completely dissolved, she smiled slightly. The backfire of the spell was equivalent to Wang Yu using herself as a sacrifice to complete the spell, and Su Li didn't need to pay any price. Su Li had thought about this ending since she guessed that Wang Yu was a spell practitioner. Crossing the inhibition and walking to the depth of the cave, Su Li saw the ownerless storage ring placed on a small stone platform at a glance. She went forward and picked it up with her psychic awareness, and was in a better mood. The feeling of getting treasures for free is not bad. The storage of celestial stones in it should be enough for me to break through to the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Unfortunately, it takes time to absorb and refine them. According to Black Lotus's estimation, it will take at least a year. Thinking of this, Su Li couldn't help but laugh at her own greed. If I didn't encounter this cave of inheritance, I don't know how many people it will take to step into the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. It's really greedy. Putting away all the storage of the 6th level, Su Li was about to leave. Suddenly, a white portal appeared in front of her out of thin air, and the other side of the portal faintly exuded a sense of heat that was completely different from the cold cave. There seems to be a rather familiar pneuma. Su Li didn't want to enter, but after smelling this pneuma, she was slightly moved. After hesitating for a moment, she finally pressed her finger on the back of her hand, and suddenly a pattern of nightmare appeared. With a flash of black light, the shapeless nightmare appeared and stretched out in the cave with a low roar. The ability of possession was the unique attachment ability of the Nightmare clan, but they rarely used it, because they were arrogant in nature, and few nightmares recognized their masters. Now, Su Li was naturally an exception. Black, take her with you. Su Li pointed at Jin Ing, who had fainted, and the nightmare made a reluctant roar, but it still obediently swallowed Jin Ing and put her in the nightmare space in its stomach. Although the nightmare space that accompanied it couldn't let people move freely, it was okay for Jin Ing to sleep in it for a month or two. Swish. After swallowing Jin Ing, the nightmare shrank back into Su Li's body. After doing all this, Su Li gathered her thoughts and stepped into the white portal without hesitation and disappeared. At the same time, Immortal Bingshu, who was waiting outside, frowned slightly. Why did the pressing method he gave to Wang Yu disappear? Could it be that this woman still had some tricks up her sleeve? Look, there is a change on the 6th stone tablet. The female practitioner just passed. A person pointed at the stone tablet and exclaimed, which immediately attracted everyone's attention. When Heaven Rover saw the 4 huge words on the stone tablet, his gentle old face showed a gloomy expression for the first time. Perfect clearance. Chapter 392. Wang Yu is missing. Someone couldn't help but go in and have a look, and immediately shouted in horror. Heaven Rover saw the exact positions of all the levels shown on the 6th stone tablet, and his face was extremely gloomy. He was fooled by a junior. She not only took away the treasure of the 6th level, but also disappeared? Sister Wang Yu is really resourceful. Senior Heaven, didn't you see through her at the beginning? Xian Meiji chuckled, and her voice was soft, but everyone in the field could hear the blame in her words. I'm not a sage. How can I not make mistakes? Heaven Rover quickly adjusted his state of mind, turned around with a smile, and glanced at Xian Meiji meaningfully. Not to mention Wang Yu, I don't even know the details of you. If there are any accidents later, don't be surprised. Ha! The middle-aged practitioner, who had no sense of existence with Immortal Bingshu, suddenly laughed out loud. Senior Heaven is right. Since Wang Yu has a special way to escape, it's useless for us to investigate further. Why don't we go to see other levels? You know, there are still 2 levels that no one has passed. Immortal Bingshu thought it was reasonable and then nodded. Instead of wasting time here, let's go to other levels. I think you have all remembered the landmarks along the way from the stone tablet. Old Lady Dua's turbid eyes flashed. I'll take my unworthy junior to other places. Everyone, I'll say goodbye. She was still thinking about the 4th level to test the strength of the soul. Except for the 3rd level that she didn't know the content of, she was most likely to pass this level. As for Dongfeng, thinking of this, she glanced at Dongfeng, who hadn't acted rashly even if he was tempted since entering the cave. This kid's state of mind was indeed better than that of his peers, but there was nothing special about him. She didn't know why her old friend insisted that she take him with her. Seeing that old Lady Duhua was about to leave, the others also followed suit and left. Heaven Rover didn't stop them and let them go. Immortal Bingshu made up his mind to try the first level. He wanted to accompany the middle-aged practitioner, but found that the latter didn't want to, so he left alone. There was still a question in his mind. It was impossible for the means of the soul he had set up to be eliminated in such a short time, unless Wang Yu. Thinking about this, Bingshu's eyes flashed with worry and he left cautiously. In less than half a day's time, everyone had left. All the treasures in the 6th stage had been taken away, so there was no reason for them to stay here. Only you are left. Heaven Rover sighed when he saw the middle-aged practitioner. Seeing this, the middle-aged cultivator hurriedly walked over and bowed respectfully. Master. This practitioner, who had also reached the Yuaning realm, actually took Heaven Wanderer as his master and had been hiding in the team to take care of him secretly. Master, I've befriended enlightened Bingshu according to your instructions. Just now, he transmitted his voice to me and asked if he wanted to go to the 1st stage with me. Heaven Rover nodded slightly after hearing this, and his face was a little unsightly. I thought that the people to be afraid of on this trip were nothing more than him and Snow Child. I didn't expect that these two people didn't show any threat, but Wang Yu, he was now almost sure that Wang Yu had successfully passed the 5th level of the pseudo-holy method, and now she had passed the 6th level perfectly. Even if he could pass at least 2 levels, he was still weaker than her. This woman clearly came prepared. With a cold snort, Heaven Rover's killing intent for Wang Yu rose to the extreme. Unfortunately, he had not yet controlled the cave, so he couldn't know where the bitch had gone. From the beginning to the end, he had never doubted or even noticed this sacrifice around Wang Yu, let alone knowing that Wang Yu, whom he was cursing in his heart, had already disappeared. Go to the 3rd level first. Heaven Rover didn't regret it for long, and ordered in a deep voice. At this point, no matter how he tried to remedy it, it was useless. It was better to hold the chips in his hand first, so as to have a glimmer of hope for the inheritance. In the next few days, the 2nd and 3rd levels were passed one after another. But because the people were scattered, no one knew who had passed the 2 levels except for the people who passed the levels. Cough, cough, cough. In the belly of a mountain, old Lady Duhua covered her mouth and coughed violently, with a touch of red flowing down her fingers. Dongfangyi looked worried. Seeing this, he quickly handed out the medicine bowl. Old Lady Duhua took it and drank it. Her injury seemed to have calmed down a little. She took a deep breath, and fear flashed through her eyes. The day before yesterday, she went to challenge the illusion of the 4th level, but she didn't expect that all the elixirs and magic treasures to protect the soul didn't work. She struggled to come out on the 5th day, but she was seriously injured and almost died. Oh, after separating, they passed the 2 levels immediately. These people really hide better than the other. Old Lady Duhua said sarcastically to herself. Old Lady Duhua was inevitably disappointed. Yuan had died here before passing the 1st test, and Old One was still entangled with the 1st test. Could it be that their generation had passed and the cave residence of inheritance was doomed to be unobtainable? Glancing at Dongfangyi, who was tidying up the medicine stove, Old Lady Duhua narrowed her eyes slightly and was about to speak. Suddenly, her ears moved, and her expression instantly turned cold. After a few breaths, Dongfangyi's face also changed. Someone is coming. Old Lady Duhua sneered, and there is more than one. Go out with me. Even if I die, I don't want to die in vain. But Dongfangyi responded heavily, threw down the medicine stove, and helped Old Lady Duhua out of the mountain. But he saw a scholar with a sallow face covered in blood rushing toward the mountain. "'Tis Immortal Bingshu." Dongfangyi was stunned. He didn't expect that the person was not vicious as he had imagined, but escaped here. When Immortal Bingshu saw Old Lady Duhua, he was also shocked, and a glimmer of hope rose in his heart. But when he saw Old Lady Duhua's heavy body, the glimmer of hope in his heart was immediately extinguished. Even reincarnation mirror didn't kill me. Does God want me to die? For a moment, countless figures and scenes flashed through Immortal Bingshu's mind, and finally fixed on the person who always had a gentle smile and treated him sincerely in the illusion of reincarnation. Knowing that there was no way to escape, and he even implicated old Lady Duhua, immortal Bingshu stopped and almost fell down. Dong Fang Yi hurriedly stepped forward to steady him. Looking at Dong Fang Yi's face, which was 80% similar to Dong Fang Wushue's, immortal Bingshu sighed in his heart, raised his head and smiled bitterly at old Lady Duhua. "I'm really sorry, I didn't expect that there would be someone here." Old Lady Duhua stared at the back of immortal Bingshu with burning eyes, let out a hearty low laugh, and said freely, "It doesn't matter. I have lived for so many years, and I have understood a lot of truths. What I should meet? I can't escape. Since I can't escape, I don't need to escape. Even if I have to risk my life, I will bite a piece of flesh from the enemy." Hearing this, immortal Bingshu was stunned and then grinned. "I really regret that I didn't get to know you earlier. It's not too late to get to know you now." Seeing the two coming figures, old Lady Duhua's pupils shrank, and her cane floated in her hand. She didn't forget to answer immortal Bingshu. "It turns out to be." Seeing the person, Dong Fangyi opened his mouth slightly in surprise, and his mind was shocked. "Sure enough, it's you, Heaven Rover." Old Lady Duhua lowered her eyes slightly, wiped the blood on the corner of her mouth, and said in a loud voice. When they met again, Heaven Rover's look was no longer kind, but full of coldness and killing intent. "Old Lady Duhua, I want to kill him. Why do you have to get involved?" Heaven Rover said with some scruples. Although his strength was above old Lady Duhua, if they really fought, he would still be injured. If he could persuade old Lady Duhua to leave without bloodshed, it would be the best. "Old lady," Dong Fangyi looked doubtful and couldn't help saying. Heaven Rover had shown a very good temper all the way. Maybe he had some personal grudges with immortal Bingshu. Why should they get involved? Haha. Hearing this, old Lady Duhua immediately laughed out loud. "Heaven Rover, do you think I can't tell good from evil from bad with this silly boy? If you really kill Bingshu, the next one to die will be me, right?" Heaven Rover was silent for a while, and his voice was even colder. "In that case, there is nothing to say." As soon as he finished speaking, the middle-aged practitioner beside him rushed to him without saying a word. Dong Fangyi's heart immediately jumped to his throat. Both immortal Bingshu and old lady were like an arrow at the end of its flight. How could they be the opponent of this middle-aged practitioner? "I can't. Grandma saved my life before." Dong Fangyi gritted his teeth and thought about it. He was about to rush up, but at the critical moment, a white door suddenly appeared in front of Dong Fang. The middle-aged practitioner had always been cautious and immediately retreated when he saw the door. But Dong Fangyi stared at the door in a daze. He sensed a breath. Although he hadn't sensed this breath for decades, he was really too familiar with it. "Hurry up, come in," a faint voice came out. Dong Fangyi trembled violently, and his resolute eyes overflowed with tears. Without saying a word, he rushed into the door and transmitted the sound to old Lady Duhua and immortal Bingshu at the same time. "Seniors, if you believe me, go in with me." Facing a desperate situation, immortal Bingshu and old Lady Duhua also decisively disappeared into the door with Dong Fang. Heaven Rover looked at everyone disappearing in front of him with a blank face. After a moment of silence, a burst of anger that couldn't be suppressed emerged from the bottom of his heart. "What's going on? What the hell is going on? I have only been away for 100 years. How many changes have happened in this cave of inheritance?" Looking at the ferocious old face of Heaven Rover, the middle-aged practitioner subconsciously took a few steps back and kept silent. He had never seen his master lose his composure like this. "I am the lineal descendant of the Tsang family. I am the real inheritor, the only one." Chapter 393. In a valley full of birds and flowers, there was a small hut. Many common elixirs were planted next to the hut, exuding a faint fragrance. Su Li was sitting quietly beside the stone table surrounded by wooden fences, meditating. The pale-faced young man sitting opposite her looked at Su Li, and he was a little nervous. Obviously, he wanted to ask Su Li for help. until he heard the slight footsteps coming from outside the valley. Su Li's eyes flashed and she finally said, "I promise you. But you should also know that I can't give you a guarantee." The pale young man was relieved when he heard the words, as if it was the best result as long as Su Li promised. "Then I have to trouble you, Your Excellency. If the situation is irreversible as you said, then please take my son away from here safely. According to the agreement, I have recorded what happened that year here." Su Li's eyes flashed, and she took the jade slip handed by the pale young man. Then she stood up and walked silently into the house. After 2 steps, she suddenly stopped and said indifferently with her back to him, "I understand the feelings of being a parent, and I am not a holy girl. Don't call me that again." The pale young man was slightly stunned. Thinking of all the things in the illusion of reincarnation in the past, he could not help but smile bitterly. Just as Su Li entered the house, a shout of surprise came from the gate of the courtyard in the valley. "Dad! It's really you?" Dongfang Yi stared at the pale young man's face and couldn't help but walk quickly. The pale young man instantly stopped thinking and turned to see the 3 people outside the door. His eyes fell on the face of the young man in the middle, and a smile suddenly appeared on his cold face. Yes, he was Dongfang Yi's father, Dongfang Wuxue. In the illusion of reincarnation, he incarnated as the 12th prince of Dahan country. In the real cultivation circle, he was the evildoer of Dongfang family. With his own luck, he got a good role in the illusion. The illusion of reincarnation had existed since ancient times. It was supposed to extend a world centered on the person with the highest luck in the illusion of inheritance. If someone could unify the illusion of reincarnation, the reincarnation mirror would automatically recognize him as its master. Of course, this rule was completely extinguished by the psychic mirror spirit. Under her control, it was impossible to produce such a person. Once there was a sign, it would destroy the future master in advance as it destroyed Su Li. However, even if it could not produce a real owner, the cultivation methods and treasures in the reincarnation mirror were also extremely coveted by people in the cultivation circle. In the room, Su Li thought of Dongfang Wushue's previous description and was silent for a while. She finally knew why so many people in the last life were keen to let her open the world in the reincarnation mirror. He had finally figured out a lot of things about his previous life that he had been confused about in this life. You've grown up." Dongfang Wuxue did not forget the agreement with Su Li. He woke up after a little distraction, looked up and down at Dongfang Yi, and sighed, but did not get up to touch his son. Dongfang Yi didn't think so much. He came forward excitedly to hug his father, but he staggered and passed through Dongfang Wushue's body. "Shadow!" Dongfang Yi's face changed immediately. He knelt nervously in front of Dongfang Wuxue and carefully observed his father's body. When he saw the beam of light penetrate Dongfang Wushue's body, his face suddenly turned pale. "Why is it a shadow? Dad, Your father won't die so easily." Dongfang Wuxue didn't let him finish the second half of the sentence, and scolded with a smile. Dongfang immediately breathed a sigh of relief. When he came to his senses, he realized that his back was soaked. If he met his father again and found that his father was dead, it would be the cruelest punishment for him. "Fellow practitioner Dongfang, it's my pleasure to meet you. I will never forget your life-saving grace." Old Lady Duhua came up and said softly. Anyway, they were out of danger, and this place was very suitable for healing. There was no need to worry about their lives for the time being. "Fellow practitioner Duhua, you are welcome." Raising his head, Dongfang Wushue's face returned to normal, and he said with a faint smile, "I also saw that you once saved my son's life along the way. We're even now." "You can see the situation in the cave of inheritance?" Old Lady Duhua was shocked, and subconsciously remembered that her old friend had repeatedly told her to take Dongfang Yi with her. It turned out to be true. Dongfang Yi's biological father was actually in this cave. Hearing her words, Dongfang Wuxue just smiled without saying a word, but he felt bitter in his heart. If he could, he would rather give up this ability. "Are you Dongfang Wuxue?" Immortal Bingshu, who was covered in blood, had many scabs on his wounds, and his hair was disheveled and stuck with blood clots. He was even more embarrassed than a beggar, but his face was calm. He looked at Dongfang Wuxue and said in a deep voice, "My name is Yenzai." Dongfang Wushue's calm look immediately changed, and his tone was not as casual as before. He said in the same deep tone, "It turns out to be Brother Yen, but Brother Yen?" Yenzai grinned and said, "Not everyone is as lucky as Brother Dongfang. Back then, I was seriously injured when I came out of that place, and I haven't been able to recover. Now, I'm struggling at death's door in the cultivation world. Brother Dongfang, I'm sorry." When Dongfang Wuxue heard the sentence, he immediately smiled meaningfully. He didn't say it explicitly, but secretly transmitted the sound. With Brother Yan's background, it should be easy to repair the damage to the foundation. Is it possible that Brother Yen betrayed his own force like me? Yenzai's eyes narrowed slightly. Dongfang Wuxue exposed his shame, but he was also calm. He replied, "That practice is incompatible with my Taoist heart. People with different principles cannot make plans together. I have not regretted betraying my sect. And, although it is absurd, Su Li did have a lot of influence on me in the illusion that year, so that I can no longer treat my master and others as my close friends. Who on earth became whose furnace in such a scheme? Ha, it's really ridiculous." Dongfang Wuxue slightly pursed his lips. "Brother Yen, you are wrong. Not everyone still has the memory of the illusion like us. Those who came out of the illusion with the life ring as a substitute only remember the practice methods and secret skills. If there was no accident in that year," Yenzai's expression changed immediately, "so that's how it is." Dongfang Yi and Old Lady Duhua saw that Dongfang Wuxue and Yenzai suddenly remained silent at the same time. Naturally, they knew that the two were transmitting the sound. And it seemed that the two were old acquaintances. They knew each other but didn't know each other. Old Lady Duhua had lived for too long and had a clear mind. She didn't want to inquire about the relationship between the two, and directly sat aside to heal herself. Dongfang Yi sat aside worriedly, but he was worried about his father's not-solid body. After half a day, the communication between the two talents of that year came to an end. There was a smile on each of their faces, but they didn't know the meaning. Dongfang Wuxue looked at the room without a trace, and thoughts turned in his mind. Yenzai clearly entered the cave with Su Li. I am afraid that Su Li has recognized him for a long time. Fortunately, he is not very clear about what happened in that year, and I have enough bargaining chips. However, with Yenzai's help, I may have a greater chance. In the following period of time, Dongfang Yi and the other two stayed here to concentrate on healing. Although Yenzai and Old Lady Duhua's injuries were serious, they were not troublesome. With the help of elixirs, they recovered to the peak state before entering the cave in just 1 month. As for Dongfang Yi, he was receiving the guidance of Dongfang Wuxue to make up for the lack of inheritance in his childhood. However, Dongfang Yi was very uneasy to learn. He always felt that his father was making arrangements for his death, and his mind became heavier. Since you have recovered from your injuries, why don't you come over and sit down for a talk? Dongfang Wuxue invited with a smile. Yenzai and Old Lady Duhua naturally had no objection and sat down next to each other. For the first time in countless years, the square stone table was full. This cave was left by immortal Tsang Lei. I think you know it from the stone tablet, but when Dongfang Wuxue said this, his voice suddenly became low. Half of the contents in the stone tablet are fake. What? Dongfang Yi was the most impatient and couldn't help exclaiming. Yenzai and Old Lady Duhua also changed their faces slightly. They had never doubted the authenticity of the stone tablet. Although I have a vague feeling when you enter the cave, as long as there is a sparrow, I can't feel it. Dongfang Wuxue then said a name, which made Yenzai frown. Who is the sparrow? It is the heaven rover, you know. Dongfang Wuxue looked at Yenzai and softly threw out a shocking fact. Heaven rover was possessed by the sparrow 100 years ago, and he was in this cave. And the person who came here with heaven rover 100 years ago was me. The sparrow was originally the mansion spirit of this cave, responsible for waiting for the successor of immortal Tsang Lei. But because of the long time, the sparrow gave birth to its own intelligence, broke away from the shackles of the cave, and became an evil spirit. Dongfang Wushue's tone was still calm, but the fists hidden in his sleeves were unconsciously clenched. After I came here with Heaven Rover, I was caught by the sparrow. Heaven Rover was possessed by it, and my soul was stripped away by it, replacing its original position. In the small courtyard, there was a long silence. I see. Old Lady Duhua's face was pale. The truth was often far beyond imagination. A mansion spirit, who was arranged by the master to manage the cave, lived for countless years, and had a disloyal mind. He even tried to break away from the concept of spirit and become a human being, and become the successor of the master. Even in the ancient cultivation era, such an evil thing was definitely rare. Dongfang Wushue continued, because of this, I can vaguely sense what happened in the cave, but I am not the real mansion spirit after all, and many things are not under my control. The sparrow stripped away my soul and wanted to make me a puppet with no consciousness, but it didn't know that I was protected by a rare treasure and my mind was not scattered. If not, I'm afraid I can't save you by surprise. However, I appeared in front of the sparrow this time, so I'm afraid he already knows my existence. Dongfang panicked when he heard it. What should we do? Dad, will the sparrow? Don't worry. Chapter 394. That's good. Dongfang breathed a sigh of relief and frowned. No, if the sparrow takes control of this cave, he will definitely take you out to avoid future troubles. What should we do then? Then we won't let him get the cave. Yen Zai sneered. The sparrow has schemed against everyone. If I'm not wrong, he invited us in just to use us to help him break the 6 levels, right? Dongfang Wushue thought of the contents of the stone tablet 100 years ago and nodded gently. The iron law of the cave is that there are 6 levels. If a person fails in 2 of the levels, he will be recognized as a waste, and he will be killed if he tries again. No wonder. Yen Zai's pupils shrank. I stayed in the first level for a long time, but I didn't see many people. It seems that almost all of them are dead. Old Lady Duhua was silent and sighed in her heart. If she hadn't been seriously injured in the 3rd level, she would have been killed instantly. Now it seemed that it was a good thing to pass the 3rd level. Dongfang Wushue closed his eyes slightly, and all kinds of situations in the cave appeared in front of him. Not long after, he opened his eyes and said, When you came in, there were 81 people. Now, apart from you and the sparrow master and servant, there are only 4 people left. 2 of them are traveling together. They are a woman and a white-haired boy in white clothes. The other one is a tall, thin, and ordinary-looking man. These 3 people are in the boundless wilderness. After they are far away from the stone tablet, the sparrow can't sense their location, so they survived. Even fellow practitioner Wen is dead. Old Lady Duhua couldn't help but feel sad. The elders surnamed Wen and Yuan were practitioners of the same generation as her. Although their relationship had never been good, after the death of these 2 people, the practitioners of Yuaning realm who were her peers were all dead. No, Dad, you clearly said that 4 people survived, but you only told the whereabouts of 3 people. Who is the other one? Dongfang couldn't help asking. Dongfang Wushue looked at his son, smiled meaningfully, stood up and walked to the hut. You all come with me. Everyone immediately followed. When they came to the room, the light was slightly dim, but they could still clearly see a girl who looked no more than 14 or 15 years old lying on the bed. It's her. Dongfang recognized her at once. He still remembered that Su Li came to ask him about Dongfang Wushue in the camp. This woman isn't. Old Lady Duhua frowned. She knew very well what kind of person Wang Yu was. How could she let the sacrifice go? Curse cultivators do have some ability. Dongfang Wushue said in a deep voice. From then on, what he said was naturally a lie colluded with Su Li. At that time, in the 6th trial, the woman in red used the lives of 2 little girls to break through the restrictive spell. She went against the natural order of the world. I used the door to save one, but the other turned into a bloody mist. It was difficult to save her. After one less sacrifice, the woman took the girl's place and turned into a bloody mist. The restrictive spell was also broken. This explanation was flawless. Not only old lady Du Hua and Dongfang Yi, but also Yan Zai, who was related to Wang Yu, believed it. Wang Yu really died in such a ridiculous way. Curse cultivation is really a trick that harms others and oneself. Originally, he wanted to learn the incantation after he controlled Wang Yu, but now, he gave up the idea. However, although I have saved this girl, Dongfang Wuxue spread out his hands helplessly, but I can't wake her up. Old lady Du Hua nodded and said, "The incantation is weird and unpredictable. Since you saw that the incantation had already started, although Wang Yu reaped what she sowed, the incantation inevitably had an impact on her. If the practitioner with high cultivation was strong, he wouldn't care, but this little girl has just reached Lianqi realm." Dongfang Wuxue couldn't help but laugh in his heart. He nodded and said, "I think so too. I can't leave here. This girl will die if she stays here all the time. Please take her away. No matter what the result is, there is a glimmer of hope." Dongfang Yi looked at the quiet sleeping face on the bed and remembered the picture when they first met in the camp. He was silent for a moment, then directly picked up Su Li and carried her on his back. This move almost scared his father Dongfang Wuxue to death. When did his son become so bold? He even dared to touch the body of the holy girl. Did he want to die? In his heart, the feeling of awe for Su Li was still greater than any other emotion. He didn't even dare to think about physical contact, but his son put it into practice. Looking at Su Li lying on his back and still calm face, it seemed that she was really asleep. Dongfang Wuxue was full of uneasiness, but he didn't dare to show any strange expression. He immediately talked about the plan to break the situation. The sparrow is determined to get this cave. Now the cave has already entered a closed state, and I can't open a hole for you to get out. The only way is for you to get the inheritance of this cave before the sparrow. As he said, he looked at Yan Zai. "Brother Yan, this is related to my plan. Please answer truthfully. Can you pass the 5th level?" Yan Zai narrowed his eyes slightly and finally nodded gently. Old lady Du Hua and Dongfang Yi were both shocked, but Dongfang Wuxue laughed and said, "Sure enough. I know that with your aptitude, the pseudo-holy method is nothing to you." "Brother Dongfang, you flatter me." Yan Zai's expression didn't change much. After a polite greeting, he couldn't help but think of the practice method taught by Mr. Li in The Illusion of Reincarnation. After returning to reality, he found that it was a complete low-level holy method, and the so-called Mr. Li and Immortal Master were just one person. Since Brother Yan is here, I have to change my method, and I will have a greater chance. Like this, half a day later, Dongfang Wuxue waved his hand, and a white door appeared, leading to the dark cave. A group of 4 people waved goodbye. Dongfang Yi walked at the end reluctantly, but he had thought that he could rescue his father after this trip was successful. Finally, he gritted his teeth and stepped into the whirlpool to leave. Su Li, it's all up to you. Dongfang Wuxue watched the crowd disappear, and his eyes fell on the back of Dongfang Yi, praying secretly in his heart. Yan Zai might be able to cope with the real test, but in the end he could only rely on Su Li. He saw it clearly in the 5th level. Su Li didn't spend any effort on this cave at all, and it only took her a little more than 2 days to master the pseudo-holy method. As the protagonist of The Illusion of Reincarnation, he knew that her talent must be above everyone else. But what he didn't know was that even with Su Li's talent in the reincarnation mirror, she couldn't achieve such an exaggerated level. Everything started from the Black Lotus Ring. After Yan Zai and others came out from Dongfang Wushue's place, they came to a long black stone corridor. According to Dongfang Wuxue, this road led to the real center of the cave, and the purpose of the sparrow to pass the 6th level was also here. In the center, only those who passed the 5th level could take the real successor test, such as old lady Du Hua, could only follow Yan Zai as a bystander. No one knows the standard of passing the test, even the sparrow. It seems that I have to use my real strength, but my injury. Yan Zai frowned secretly, but just in a moment his eyebrows stretched out. If the sparrow controlled this cave, he would either die or be a slave. With the pride in his heart, how could he be a slave to others? So, In the face of death, the old injury was nothing. Yen Zai smiled, and his pace suddenly accelerated. The old sparrow must have entered the center a long time ago. We have to hurry up. Old Lady Du Hua and Dongfang didn't quite understand Yen Zai's change, but they also agreed with him and rushed to the center at the fastest speed. Concentrating on the road, no one noticed that Su Li on the back of Dongfang quietly opened her eyes. Her black pure eyes glanced at Yen Zai, and then closed again. In such a hurry, they soon came to the end of the black stone path, a tall golden gate. However, the stone gate, which should have been closed, now had a gap for one person to walk through. Seeing this, Yen Zai sneered and said, "Most of the runes on this gate were left by the ancient times. It is difficult for us to open it, and we have to thank the old man for opening the way for us." "That's right." Old Lady Du Hua chuckled, and the three of them entered and disappeared one after another. Soon after, two figures, one tall and one short, also appeared in front of the gate. They were Xian Meiji and Snow Child. "Is this the real inheritance that the old man wants, as the mansion spirit said?" Xian Meiji smiled coquettishly, but her anger couldn't stop escaping from her eyes. No one would feel good being used by others, not to mention that they were not ordinary people, but the heavenly sons of cultivation of this generation. Snow Child looked indifferent, and even didn't move his eyebrows, but he walked extremely fast and entered the giant gate without hesitation. Then, the practitioner surnamed Huang appeared and entered the giant gate with a gloomy face. Although he was not strong enough, he had to stop Heaven Rover in order to survive. In the small valley, Dongfang Wuxue poured himself a cup of tea made of spiritual medicine. He just looked at it without drinking it, and his eyes were burning. At this point, everyone was sent to the center according to the agreement between him and Su Li, and he could not sense the situation in the center. Next, they could only wait. Boom! On the bright rectangular stone path, the spiritual stone lamps on both sides seemed to be burning for tens of thousands of years without extinguishing. Not long after Yen Zai and others left, they heard a loud sound along the stone path. "It seems to be thunder?" Dongfang murmured, but old Lady Du Hua nodded and said, "Immortal Tsang Lei, there is thunder in his name." In ancient times, the name of cultivation was not chosen randomly. Maybe the former owner of the cave really had the ability to control thunder. Thunder is the nemesis of all evil spirits. Even if the sparrow possesses Heaven Rover, it will not feel good under the thunder and lightning, and the difficulty of the test will be increased accordingly. Our chances will be greater. Yen Zai heard what old Lady Du Hua said and nodded secretly. While talking, the rectangular stone path came to an end, and a huge cave emitting light blue starlight appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 395. The extremely violent power kept twisting on the altar, as if it would burn its master as long as it rebelled a little. The sparrow stood on the altar with his face flushed. The feeling of thunder and lightning entering his body was not good. He even had a feeling that his soul was leaving his body, which showed the disadvantages of possession. "Go to hell!" A roar turned into a soul spike and shot out. The sparrow was caught off guard and was pierced by the spike. An inhuman howl immediately sounded in the whole cave. It was not Yen Zai and his fellows who did it, but Shuiqing Wanren, the servant who had been standing respectfully under the altar and followed the sparrow for 100 years. Yen Zai looked at this scene in astonishment, while Shuiqing Wanren was livid at the moment. He looked at the sparrow on the altar with hatred in his eyes. "I should have known that my master had died long ago. You deserve to die." Shuiqing was the servant of Heaven Rover, but not by virtue of the soul contract. He was tragically saved by Heaven Rover when he was a child. Although Heaven Rover had no requirements for him, he voluntarily followed him as a slave. Even as time went by, his cultivation reached Yuaning realm, he did not have any disloyalty. In the past 100 years, his master suddenly became harsh to him, but he did not think too much and did not want to think too much. Until now, under the bombardment of thunder and lightning, the sparrow revealed the essence of its soul. He finally despaired. His master was really dead. "Bastard, how dare you disobey me?" A sharp howl came from Heaven Rover's mouth. After all, he was not a human being. He was seriously injured and enraged, so he immediately lost his mind. He pointed at Shuiqing Wanren with thunder and lightning. The thunder and lightning in the altar were immediately triggered, and a large number of electric arcs shot out along the body of Heaven Rover. In the blink of an eye, the cave was full of thunder and lightning. Oh no! The surging thunder and lightning made Old Lady Duhua's face change dramatically. Yen Zai's eyebrows twitched, and he opened a defensive shield. The thunder and lightning bombarded it, and the crackling sound was endless. After a few breaths, the shield was as thin as paper. "I'll help you too." Old Lady Duhua shouted in a low voice and slapped the ground with her hands. The power of Yuanying realm gushed out, and the shield that was about to be broken was immediately thickened, but the speed of thickening still could not keep up with the speed of weakening by thunder and lightning. "I'll help too." Dongfang Yi touched the shield with one hand and injected his genuine energy into it, but he could not help being frustrated. After 30 breaths, Yen Zai and others were a little pale, but Dongfang Yi had fallen to the ground, panting heavily. Phew! Yen Zai took a long breath, gasped slightly, and looked at Heaven Rover, who had been electrocuted into a charred corpse on the altar. Although the evil spirit was crazy, it still had the instinct to protect itself after leaving Heaven Rover's physical body, and it took over Shangqing Rover's body for protection. Wanderer Shangqing won't be able to hold on for much longer. Furthermore, the lightning on the sacrificial altar has been triggered, and the evil spirits have already gone mad. Recognizing the situation, Yen Zai said in a low voice. Granny Duhua was about to speak, but suddenly she saw 3 figures coming to the shield together. As He Yen, and the thunder and as the lightning. As possible. See, what kind of thunder and lightning is this? Why is it so powerful? Xian Meiji sat on the ground awkwardly, panting violently. They didn't see the whole situation. They had no time to prepare on the way here. If the 3 of them hadn't gone together to resist the thunder and lightning, they would have died on the road. Just in time. Old Lady Duhua smiled. With 5 people taking turns, we can hold on for a long time. The practitioner surnamed Huang also said, seizing the time to restore the power of Yuanying realm. Yen Zai glanced at them and didn't ask much. Unsurprisingly, these people were all brought here by Dongfang Wuxue. He couldn't put his hope on himself alone. One more meant one more hope. It seemed that this was the case. Snow Child didn't seem to consume much energy. His small white palm print was on the shield, and the shield's thickness immediately increased. Yen Zai suddenly felt relieved. He looked at him in surprise but didn't speak. His attention returned to the altar. Giggle, in the boundless thunder and lightning, Heaven Rover had already been electrocuted into ashes, but Shangqing Wanren was protected by the evil spirit in a special way, unscathed. He was still struggling in his eyes, but the time of struggle was much shorter. It wouldn't take long for him to be completely possessed. We can't wait. We have to find a chance to kill this evil spirit. Yen Zai's voice was low, and the 3 newcomers had different expressions. This scene was enough for them to imagine what had happened. In the torturous waiting, everyone was trying to restore the power of Yuanying realm, waiting for the opportunity, and the time of Shangqing Wanren's sobriety was getting shorter and shorter. 3 breaths, 2 breaths, 1 breath, half a breath, do it? Yen Zai shouted in a low voice, and the 5 people rushed out without hesitation. Those who could survive until here were all sensible people. If they still hid their selfishness at this moment, they really didn't want to live long. The sparrow, who was still controlling the body, opened his eyes. The whites of his eyes were pitch black, and he looked ferocious. "Lowly bugs, you ruined my plan. Go to hell." He twisted the 2 fingers of his right hand, and the blue starlight in the cave was immediately activated, converging into a blue spiritual whip and lashing at Yen Zai and others like a spiritual snake. Yen Zai, who rushed to the front, immediately changed his face when he saw this. His hands turned into shadows, and he made a gesture in an instant. He shouted softly, "Inescapable net, come out." Swish. A giant net appeared out of thin air in the nothingness, shrouding the spiritual whip. But after the contact, the spiritual whip penetrated the giant net without any hindrance and continued to swing. Tsk. If such a small trick could trap my soul whip, how could I have survived until now? The evil spirit laughed wildly, and Yenzai's pupils shrank suddenly. Oh no! This spiritual whip is aimed at the soul. Be careful, everyone. As soon as he said this, Snow Child in the crowd didn't retreat, but moved forward. He opened his mouth slightly and shouted softly, "Freeze!" The spiritual whip, which had been waving rapidly, immediately froze in the air and stopped moving. The spell of words? There are still people who learn this crafty trick. Damn it! The evil spirit shouted angrily, obviously recognizing this technique. Yenzai's heart was also slightly moved. He was also from a big sect, so he had naturally heard of this technique. The person who practiced this technique must be a man of few words, even mute. His voice could only be heard when he performed the technique. It turned out that this was the reason why Snow Child didn't speak all the way. With my cultivation, I can only hold on for 5 breaths. Hurry up. The 4 people received the slightly anxious voice transmission from Snow Child at the same time. Yenzai came to his senses in an instant and laughed. 5 breaths, that's enough. He touched the storage ring with his finger, and a flying sword shining with cold sharpness immediately appeared in his palm. He didn't make any movement, but the flying sword shot out like lightning. It soared against the wind, and the thunder and lightning around it were also condensed on the surface of the sword. Void sword cut. In the blink of an eye, the flying sword that turned into a lightning sword crossed the body of Shangqing Wanren and slammed into the hard stone wall. 5 breaths were up. Snow Child sat paralyzed on the ground, looking at the spiritual whip breathlessly, but it hung down powerlessly, and then dispersed into blue stars floating above the cave. Crash! Shangqing Wanren's body was split in half, and his blood and internal organs were scattered on the ground. Void Sword, you are Yenzai of Void Sword sect who disappeared 1,000 years ago. Snow Child's voice transmission appeared in Yenzai's awareness sea, and a trace of shock appeared on his indifferent face. Ahem! Yenzai sat on the ground, and blood gushed out of his mouth freely. Hearing Snow Child's voice transmission, he forced himself to grin, and his expression was full of self-mockery. I don't want the name of Void Sword, but now I use Void Sword to save my life. It's ridiculous. The thunder and lightning in the nothingness gradually dissipated, and soon even mortals could receive it. Dongfengyi came over with Su Li on his back, with indescribable excitement in his heart. The sparrow had been destroyed, and everything seemed to be settled. Next, as long as he could get the recognition of thunder and lightning, he could save his father. But at this moment, an arc that could not be captured by human eyes suddenly appeared out of thin air, and suddenly shot into the mind of the practitioner surnamed Huang, who was the most relaxed. No, fellow practitioner Huang. Xian Meiji exclaimed, but she had no time to stop it. She watched the practitioner surnamed Huang being controlled by the sparrow and rushing to the altar. At the same time, a crazy howl resounded through the cave. Damn bug, why do you block my way? It's impossible for me in this life. We'll all be buried with me. The sparrow angrily pulled open the transparent barrier to isolate thunder and lightning, condensed a white flame in his hand, and threw it into the barrier. After finishing this step, the practitioner surnamed Huang fell powerlessly on the edge of the altar, and became an empty shell without soul. That's the origin of its soul. Oh no, it wants to. Xian Meiji turned pale. She knew the sparrow's purpose, but it was too late to stop it. Fellow practitioner Huang was outstanding for his speed, and old lady Du Hua couldn't catch up with him. Yenzai and Snow Child, who had hidden their strength, were unable to fight again. Well, everything is over. Looking at the thunder and lightning barrier, a mass of white was constantly enlarging. Yenzai smiled bitterly and closed his eyes. I can't believe I will die here. Snow Child bit his lips. The verbal compliance spell was powerful, but it also needed corresponding cultivation to support it. He could no longer reverse the outcome. Dad? Dongfeng was full of unwillingness and murmured. When he was about to die, he still thought of his father's predicament. Alas, at this moment he suddenly heard a sigh and heard the direction of the sigh. His eyes widened at once. Boom! The white light occupied everything, and everyone was full of despair. They could hear nothing but a loud bang in their ears. Only Dongfeng struggled to hope for a miracle because of that sigh. And God really seemed to hear his prayer, or? Su Li heard it. The white light dissipated. Yen Zai was stunned for a moment. He looked at his original injury, and then looked around. Nothing had changed. How could it be, after the thunder and lightning went out of control, he didn't suffer any harm? Or was he dead? I'm not dead? Xian Meiji pinched her arm and felt pain. She cried and laughed. There was no seduction on her face, but a sense of young innocence. Snow Child pursed his lips, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help curling up. Old Lady Duhua also sighed and chuckled. It seemed that, as her old friend said, she could live to the end of her life. Everyone was feeling the beauty of life and hadn't come back to their senses. Only one person stared blankly at the petite figure standing on the altar, touching the empty space behind her with a blank face. Chapter 396. It seemed that a century had passed, but in fact, it was just a moment. Everyone came back to their senses and finally noticed Su Li on the altar. The 5 people had different expressions, but more or less they were all shocked. It turns out that she is the one who hides the deepest. Yen Zai's calm state of mind was stirred. Su Li's bone age and cultivation were in front of him. Since Dongfeng Wuxue entrusted her to the present, he had never doubted Su Li. Su Li's action was completely unexpected. She is not afraid of thunder and lightning. We can't stand the thunder arc that the light emits. Which holy sect is this little monster? Xian Meiji's beautiful eyes widened slightly, looking at the thunder snake that was constantly moving in Su Li's hand. The thunder arc was also limited to a small area by her and could not escape. All the figures of the holy sects flashed through Snow Child's mind, but none of them matched. He could only shake his head helplessly. The new generation excels the old. I am really old. If I can go out safely this time, I will quit the dispute and enjoy a happy life. Old Lady Duhua sighed bitterly. This trip to the ancient cave seemed to make her realize the reality, and she even had the idea of retiring. Dongfeng froze for a moment, came back to his senses, hesitated for a moment, and walked to the altar. He was the only one who had talked to Su Li. Although Su Li showed a magical side at this moment, he was not afraid, but worried. After all, the thunder and lightning were so terrible. Don't come over. Su Li turned her head and said without taking 3 steps. Her voice was still the same, ethereal like a clear spring, but her tone was not as innocent as before. Instead, it was full of indifference, the kind of indifference that could only be found in the cultivation circle for many years. Dongfeng stopped and did not dare to go forward. He had mixed feelings and didn't know what to say for a while. Su Li had no time to care about others at this moment. The thunder and lightning were very powerful. At the moment of contact, half of her body was paralyzed and she couldn't move for a while. During this time, she had no power to protect herself, so she would not let anyone get close to her, even if Dongfeng had no malice to her. The pneuma of this thunder is not like the divine thunder of earth. Instead, it has a wet taste. Is it the divine thunder of water? Su Li tried to adapt her physical body to it, and her thoughts turned. Water conserves all things without competing. According to the attributes of the 5 elements, the attack of the divine thunder of water is on the weaker side. It's not a bad choice for me to take back the divine thunder of the 5 elements as a starting point. A bright light flashed in her eyes. The Black Lotus only mentioned the divine thunder of 5 elements to her, but he didn't mention the divine thunder of 5 elements. This meant that he was afraid that she had a way to control it. The 5 elements divine lightning was extraordinary. Now that she had a chance to try it out, there was no reason for her to waste it. She still focused on suppressing the lightning. Don't disturb her. Old Lady Duhua's slightly gentle voice came from behind. Dong Fang Yi felt a little comforted when he heard it. He retreated to Old Lady Duhua and waited quietly. 3 days and 3 nights later, Su Li moved her hands and feet freely for a while. She finally adapted to the intensity of thunder and lightning. After this forcible quenching, she could feel that her physical body had been improved again. Now even the giant bell at the second level of the outer cave was useless to her. Su Li's strength was enhanced, but she was not very happy. As expected, forcefully suppressing the lightning will not allow me to obtain this cave dwelling. She sank into deep thought as her delicate brows furrowed. She could not sense any connection between herself and the cave. By the way, the pseudo-holy method. After a while of contemplation, Su Li thought of a breakthrough and tried to run the pseudo-holy method. At the moment when the pneuma of the pseudo-holy method appeared, the thunder snake, which had been completely quiet and dormant in Su Li's body, immediately rioted. The coercion produced by the combination of the two filled the entire cave in the blink of an eye, and the 5 people present turned pale with horror. Dong Fang Yi, who had poor cultivation, was directly pressed to the ground and ate a mouthful of mud. This is the pseudo-holy method? The third one to pass the level is her. Sensing the familiar pneuma of the practice method, Yan Zai's mouth twitched, but he didn't feel much shock in his heart. What Su Li showed just now was enough to shock him. Now the information was not so eye-catching. The thunder snake has become obedient. Although the coercion in the cave was bursting, Su Li herself couldn't feel it. She just felt that the thunder snake suddenly came alive. After contacting with the pseudo-holy method, it showed a trace of intimacy to her, and was no longer full of unwillingness and resentment as before. Does the thunder and lightning have spiritual intelligence? Su Li's eyes narrowed slightly, showing a trace of interest. She didn't know what it meant, but it didn't prevent her from distinguishing the good from the bad. Any dead thing in the cultivation circle was naturally better if it had spiritual intelligence. Young man, your talent surprises me. Accept my inheritance. An old and gentle voice suddenly sounded in her ears, leaving Su Li no time to react. Her mind was taken by it. At the same time, a strong coercion burst out from Su Li, and the 5 people waiting in the cave all blacked out and became unconscious. After Su Li's consciousness passed through a period of not too long darkness, she came to a strange space with no top or bottom. In the center of the space, there was a little white light flashing, reflecting a faint figure. It was a middle-aged man who exuded a calm atmosphere. His broad shoulders were like a mountain, shrouding the strange space, reflecting a blue shadow, and moistening things silently like the spring rain. Su Li glanced at the black spot emitting black light on her body, which represented her own thoughts. She was moved, leaned forward, and asked in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Senior, are you immortal Tsang Lei?" The middle-aged man grinned and seemed to laugh. "You are very calm, and you don't seem to be afraid of me? Aren't you afraid of being trapped here forever?" Su Li smiled slightly. "If being afraid is useful." Ho ho, Immortal Tsang Lei really laughed this time, and looked at Su Li with undisguised admiration. "Junior, it seems that you are more complicated than what I see now. Are you willing to be my successor?" He went straight to the point and was very straightforward. It was not easy for him to meet a fairly good junior cultivator, and he didn't have much time, so he naturally had to seize it. "Of course." Su Li chuckled and said indifferently, "It's not a burden to have more skills, as long as you don't mind that I am a female practitioner." When it came to inheritance, Immortal Tsang Lei's expression became serious. "As long as you can meet my standards, it doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman." As he said, he shook his head, "Although I never thought that the successor who inherited my mantle would be a delicate little girl after tens of thousands of years. Thunder is extremely irritable, even if it is the divine thunder of water. I think you have seen its power." Su Li nodded. Her physical body was much beyond the cognition of ordinary practitioners, and even she felt it was incredible. If she met such a lucky chance in her previous life, her performance would only be as bad as Yan Zai and others, and she couldn't seize the opportunity to get the inheritance at all. "Very good. Immortal Tsang Lei nodded. In this case, I will teach you the real holy method of Thunder School. Remember, this method is called Chongkong Thunder Tactics, which is the most important method of my sect. If you succeed in practicing it, you will be invincible among the thunder-controlling practitioners of the same rank. You will be honored for it. As he shouted, he pointed between Su Li's eyebrows with one finger. Countless years of experience and insights of practicing Chongkong Thunder Tactics poured into Su Li's mind. Compared to cultivating on one's own, the cultivation speed of this inheritance was countless times faster. This girl is really lucky. With my last remnant soul to teach her the practice method personally, even if she can't break through the cage in the future, she can dominate Qingshui Circle. Immortal Tsang Lei's figure became brighter, and there was more relief on his face. Finally, his own inheritance and the inheritance of Chongkong sect were not cut off. Su Li didn't feel anything and was still immersed in understanding the practice method. She subconsciously pinched the gesture with both hands, trying to condense the first genuine energy of Tsang Lei. Immortal Tsang Lei, who was about to disappear, couldn't help but be speechless when he saw this scene. After all, it was a holy method of a sect. Even if she was an evildoer, it was impossible to condense genuine energy in just a quarter of an hour. This girl was still too young. As soon as this thought flashed in his mind, his eyes suddenly widened and showed a look of horror. This genuine energy of Tsang Lei? Looking at the thumb-sized blue lightning ball that appeared in Su Li's hands, Immortal Tsang Lei was suddenly stunned, but the shock brought to him by Su Li was obviously not over. When the blue lightning ball was sent into the pubic region along the meridians by Su Li, the genuine energy of Tsang Lei, which symbolized the supreme holy method, was immediately pressed at the bottom of the pubic region by the original black genuine energy, and there was no room for resistance. Immortal Tsang Lei. He did not hesitate to wait for tens of thousands of years, and even didn't care that the mansion spirit became his inheritor, just to wait for an excellent descendant. Now the inheritor came, but this inheritor seemed to be too excellent. Good. Immortal Tsang Lei's eyes brightened, and he looked at Su Li, who was still in meditation. Like a rare treasure, the top holy methods are reduced to a foil. The greater the opportunity you have, the more impossible it is for the inheritance of my sect to be cut off. I, the 42nd generation disciple of Chongkong sect, will die without regret. Ha! In the laughter, Immortal Tsang Lei's figure faded away, and finally disappeared completely. In the strange space, only Su Li was quietly understanding the Chongkong thunder tactics. From this moment on, there was no Immortal Tsang Lei in the world. After a long time, Su Li opened her eyes. Her starry eyes flickered for a moment, and then the light converged. Sensing the pneuma of the remnant soul fragments in the nothingness, she got up and bowed respectfully with sincere eyes. Senior, your inheritance will not be cut off. There seemed to be a response, and the remnant soul finished its last obsession, and the fragments also turned into clear air and dissipated into nothing. I don't know if there are ancient practitioners who uphold the principles now. While muttering to herself, Su Li's mind moved, and her mind went out of the space to return to her physical body. Looking at the people lying on the ground, she didn't care, and just meditated to integrate the divine thunder of water. She still couldn't control the cave now, and the divine thunder of water was the core of the cave. If she wanted to completely refine it, Su Li estimated that it would take several years. Chapter 397. Therefore, Su Li only wanted to put away the cave after refining 10%, and then she could refine it when she had time. As for Dongfang Wuxue, he could only suffer for a few more years. After all, he had endured for 100 years, and a few more years were not a big deal. Yen Zai woke up with a muffled groan. After rubbing his eyebrows and sitting up, he happened to meet Su Li's clear eyes. Somehow, he felt a chill in his heart. This feeling was somewhat familiar. Before Yen Zai recalled, Su Li suddenly said, "In a few days I will be able to control the way to open the exit of the cave." Yen Zai was shocked when he heard this. and a sense of joy after surviving a disaster emerged from the bottom of his heart. But before he could get up to thank her, he saw the petite girl tilting her head. "I don't want to let you out. What should I do?" Yen Zai's pupils constricted, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head, and he completely calmed down. That's right, the female cultivator in front of him, who looked like a young girl, was actually a monster whose strength was even more terrifying than that of a nascent soul cultivator. He was once a proud son of heaven, so he naturally understood the personalities of these monsters. They were all very strange. After a moment of silence, he replied, "Fellow Taoist, I won't tell anyone about what happened in this cave." "Ha!" Su Li couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. "Yen Zai, you can't guarantee it." "Then what will you do?" Yen Zai's expression turned cold. Even if he was facing a monster, the consequence of going against him was very likely to be death. He had his own pride. Su Li yawned, and a sense of laziness appeared in her eyes. The divine thunder of water in her body was being refined all the time, so she didn't have to deliberately keep sitting cross-legged. "Dongfang Wuxue made a deal with me. You can do it too," she said slowly, and her calm tone fell into Yen Zai's ears, which made him look colder. He said in a deep voice, "Sure enough, Dongfang Wuxue knows your details. You have colluded before." When he thought that Dongfang Wuxue entrusted his hope to him on the surface, but he secretly put all his hope on the girl in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a little suffocated. Yes, he only needed to hold his breath. In terms of strength, he was indeed far inferior to Su Li. He was not qualified to be dissatisfied. Su Li raised her eyebrows and glanced at Snow Child, who had woken up but was still pretending to sleep. She whispered, "Do you also want to know my identity?" "Of course I want to." "Which holy sect are you?" Yen Zai said bluntly. He was indeed curious. If this woman was willing to reveal her identity, it would be for the best. However, when he saw Su Li smile, he suddenly had a bad premonition. "Let me tell you I can. However, you have to promise me something." Su Li's lips curved beautifully, and the dagger was revealed. Yen Zai thought to himself, "Sure enough," and asked openly, "What conditions?" Su Li narrowed her eyes and said softly, "Follow me and work for me." "How about I tell you?" Yen Zai's eyes widened and he stood up abruptly. Impossible. He was a dignified sky pride. Although he had already betrayed his sect, he would never submit to anyone. "Oh really?" Su Li's tone was light, but it gave off a sense of pressure out of nowhere. "So, you have to choose between surrender and death." Yen Zai sneered and said proudly, "Even if I, Yen Zai, die, I will never recognize anyone as my master." "Good." Su Li clapped her hands gently and praised, "You have a good temper. Since you don't want to, then go to hell." As she said, she waved her hand gently. Yen Zai was suddenly stunned. She was so straightforward. Did she want to kill him? Wait. He cried out in horror, but it was too late. He was directly swept by a palm, and his whole figure disappeared out of thin air. Not even a speck of dust fell. This scene suddenly scared Snow Child to open his eyes, and he even forgot to pretend to be asleep. Su Li clapped her hands with satisfaction. The newly mastered skill was not bad. Since this guy was stubborn, she would let Dongfang Wuxue persuade him. Over the valley, Dongfang Wuxue, who was waiting anxiously, suddenly changed his face slightly. He sensed a wave. Then, before he could react, he saw a black door appear out of thin air, and then a man with a sallow face with a horrified face was thrown out. "Brother Yen?" Dongfang Wuxue asked doubtfully. Yen Zai, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly woke up, as if he had woken up from a fake death. His body trembled slightly. Seeing Dongfang Wuxue floating in the air without a physical body, he didn't understand it, and muttered to himself, "Am I dead?" Dongfang Wuxue stared at Yen Zai, and his eyes were more strange. He felt that Yen Zai in front of him was a little abnormal. In the blue cave, Su Li patted Snow Child's shoulder gently, squatted down and said softly, "Snow Child, I only know that your name is Snow Child. Which sect are you from?" A little fear appeared on Snow Child's face, and he immediately told his origin like pouring beans out of a bamboo tube. He didn't want to die yet. Just now, Su Li's means of killing people without a word really scared him. I am a talent disciple of Holy Snow Sect in the Beihan region. I rank 9th on the Tianjiao list. Snow Child is just a cultivation name. My real name is Lu Yen. I have just practiced for 700 years this year. I sneaked out with Xian Meiji this time. I don't want to die. I will work for you. Su Li didn't respond after hearing it, and only glanced at Xian Meiji, who was still in a coma. At this moment, Snow Child, whose will to survive broke out, immediately told all the identity of Xian Meiji clearly. Although Xian Meiji was not a member of the Holy Sect, she also had the title of Little Holy Girl in the Beihan region. She was the eldest disciple of the smallest sect of Meizong, a high-grade sect. Although she was 700 or 800 years old like Snow Child, her mind was still simple and she had never experienced the bloodshed of the cultivation circle. The two bold people discussed and sneaked out all the way to the Jiuzhou region where the blood accident of Samsara happened. Relying on the strength of fighting beyond levels, the two also made a living. It was rumored that they were two old monsters of Yuaning realm. Then they were invited by Heaven Rover, and these things happened. Wu, don't kill me. Xian Meiji woke up and cried loudly. Her nose was bubbling, and she didn't look like a talent disciple comparable to Yuaning realm at all. Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She thought that by dealing with Yen Zai in that way, she could frighten the rest and better deal with the aftermath. But she didn't want to directly scare the two juniors to death. Holy Snow Sect and Meizong are troublesome, but I have been in trouble for a long time. I don't feel itchy when there are too many lice. These two little troubles are nothing. With this thought flashing through her mind, Su Li smiled slightly and nodded gently. Then you two will follow me for the time being. Thank you, senior. Xian Meiji was overjoyed when she heard the words. She saluted repeatedly and almost shed tears of gratitude. Although Snow Child couldn't speak, Su Li clearly saw the same emotion as Xian Meiji from his grateful eyes. Are the juniors in the cultivation circle so simple now? Su Li couldn't help laughing, shook her head and stopped caring about it. After Old Lady Duhua woke up, Su Li also asked her. Old Lady Duhua agreed directly after thinking for a while. After this trip to the cave, the arrogance in her heart had long dissipated. Now it was not a bad thing to follow an evildoer. As for Dongfeng, Su Li didn't mean to ask for his consent at all. Even his father had agreed. This guy couldn't be controlled by him. After instructing everyone to rest, Su Li was completely immersed in refining the divine thunder of water. With concentration, her speed was slightly improved. At the same time in the valley, Yen Zai and Dongfang Wuxue stared at each other, and there was a deep helplessness in the latter's eyes. Is what you said true? She really is Su Li is master? Yen Zai still used the name in the illusion of reincarnation, and his eyes were full of ecstasy and excitement. Yes, you have asked for the 88th time. Dongfang Wuxue replied weakly. If Yen Zai asked again, he really didn't want to nod. Yen Zai clenched his fists tightly. The state of mind that he had cultivated for 1,500 years seemed to be cultivated in vain. After hearing the news, he couldn't control himself at all. Master was still alive. There was nothing more shocking than this. Although it was only a short life, his experience in the small Qinghe province was more abundant than all his previous experiences of cultivation. The cultivation of the disciples of big sects was nothing more than boring meditation and practicing spells. Even if they went down the mountain to kill demons and devils, they were still feared by mortals and guarded against by peers. There was no warmth to speak of. In the Qinghe province, he saw too many feelings. His heart had entered the mortal world, and he didn't want to return to the way of forgetting emotions. After stepping into the emotional path, he also found that the so-called evil path was not as terrible as those sanctimonious people who claimed to be righteous in the sect said. On the contrary, it was more emotional. Who was the Buddha and who was the devil? No one could say clearly. He was grateful to Su Li from the bottom of his heart for the practice method she gave him at the beginning, which led him to a brighter path. However, such a talent was destroyed by a group of greedy people. How could he feel good in his heart? Therefore he betrayed the sect. Even if he was condemned by thousands of people, he still stuck to the path in his heart and didn't want to let Su Li down. But now, Dongfang Wuxue actually told him that Su Li was still alive. Moreover, they just met. Holy girl Su's appearance is quite different from that of the previous life. Her bone age is less than 15 years old. Obviously, she is a reincarnated body and has recovered her memory. Dongfang Wuxue muttered, but Yan Zai suddenly raised his head and waved his hand. Let's go and find Master now. It's my honor to follow Master and work for him. Dongfang Wuxue looked at his empty body and smiled bitterly. How could he go out? Yan Zai was really stimulated too much, and his brain was not working well. Time flew, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Buzz! With a tremor of the whole cave, the central area that was originally inlaid in the inner cave began to peel off slowly from the outer cave. It turned into a beautiful and exquisite palace at a speed visible to the naked eye and fell into the hands of Su Li, who was standing in the nothingness. Looking at the bottomless black pit, Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and waved her palm to break all the pillars that supported the outer cave. Rumble, countless floating stone platforms smashed into the pit. After a few breaths, the whole pit was filled, along with more than 100 practitioners who came in to seek opportunities. Chapter 398. In the black stone forest, a dazzling light flashed in the peaceful boulder matrix, which lasted for a few seconds before fading away. After the light returned to the original level, there were 5 more people in the middle of the boulder matrix. They were the survivors who walked out of the cave led by Su Li. There should have been 6 people, but Dongfang Yi wanted to accompany Dongfang Wuxue, so Su Li followed him. Anyway, with his cultivation, he couldn't help for the time being. Let's leave the black stone forest first. Su Li glanced at the deepest part of the black stone forest, and an imperceptible trace of doubt flashed across her eyebrows. Hearing this, everyone nodded and set off immediately. With the map contributed by Yuan's disciple, they didn't get lost. It only took them 2 days to get out of the black stone forest. Outside the faint black fog, they could vaguely see the peripheral mountains of the dangerous black stone land. Su Li sensed the mark. She secretly sat down before coming, and called softly in her heart. Immediately, a ghostly green shadow galloped over. Yan Zai and others suddenly changed their faces and were about to step forward to guard, but Su Li raised her hand and said indifferently, "It doesn't matter. It's one of us." In the blink of an eye, the green shadow came to Su Li, and the light disappeared, revealing its true face. "Master, you finally came out." When Lvu saw Su Li, the boulder in his heart disappeared. He breathed a sigh of relief and said in a hurry, "Things are not good. Zihan sect and Su family have joined hands to fight. Headmaster Hua can't hold on any longer." "Fight together?" Su Li's eyes were cold. "Go back to the sect immediately." Lvu immediately took out the spiritual boat given by Hua Yen and asked everyone to board. Then they flew to Hua Jian's sect quickly. At the same time, in the deepest part of the dark black stone forest, a black lotus swayed gently in the cold pool. Beside the pool, a languid woman with a glass of blood-red fruit wine leaned on the soft chair. Her crystal-like amber eyes seemed to be rippling with blood, which was breathtaking. Her red lips gently sipped over the edge of the cup, and her chuckle echoed around. "Giggle, it seems that the weird cave has found a successor." Interesting. In the spiritual boat, Su Li sat cross-legged on the deck and narrowed her eyes. "Lvu, tell me the ins and outs." Originally, she had wanted to explore the deepest part of the black stone forest alone. But now that something had happened, she did not dare to delay and could only throw her previous thoughts to the back of her mind. "It's Yu Lin. Yu Lin's grandfather is Yu Wutao, an elder of Weimen branch of Zihan sect. The Su family found out the origin of Su Zini's affair, and the 2 families forced him at the same time. Fortunately, Bei Xiaoliang used the identity of the little holy boy of Yushu sect to resist the first wave. But in the second wave, Yu Wutao and Su Zini's parents came to settle accounts, and Bei Xiaoliang's identity was useless. Now they have bombarded the star-stacked tactical matrix for 3 days, and the spiritual stone inventory of Huajin sect is almost exhausted. Su Li leaned on the edge of the spiritual boat and tapped her knuckles on the spiritual board. Her eyes gradually became cold. Not long after, she wiped the universe ring with her left hand and threw a ball of white light to LVU. Use this to hurry. LVU hurriedly caught it. Looking at it, he couldn't help but be stunned. This is actually a celestial crystal stone. A piece of celestial crystal was worth tens of thousands of supreme-grade spirit stones? He didn't even have a supreme-grade spirit stone, yet his master wanted him to use a celestial crystal to travel? This was too extravagant. What are you waiting for? Su Li frowned, and LVU immediately woke up. He did not dare to disobey, and put the celestial stone into the center of the spiritual boat with a painful expression. The next moment, whoosh! The spiritual boat immediately flew out like a runaway wild horse, and its speed was more than 3 times faster than before. When we arrive at Huajin sect, this spiritual boat will be useless. Yan Zai looked at the creaking inside the spiritual boat, and a touch of contemplation flashed in his eyes. Although he was confused by LVU's explanation just now, he also figured out a general idea. First, Su Li was no longer in Yushu sect. It was no wonder. After all, no matter who it was that had been tricked into such a miserable state and survived with great difficulty, how could they possibly return to that cage? Second, the so-called Huajin sect at present was very important to Su Li. Using a celestial crystal to travel explained the problem. Third, it was his chance to show off. Yan Zai's spirit was refreshed, and he looked into the distance with burning eyes. Snow Child and Xian Meiji were not stupid. After understanding the reason, they all prayed in their hearts that the strength of the so-called strong enemy was not too bad. Otherwise, how could they show their determination to follow Su Li in a short time? Old Lady Duhua laughed. Although she didn't know Su Li's identity, there was no doubt that the little master she was serving now was an evildoer. Evildoer represented absolute luck. Unless the natural law was in the way, the rise was unstoppable. Although the Su family and Zihan sect were powerful, they had never had an evildoer. What was more, it was just an elder of Wyman branch and a branch of the Su family who came to find them. It was really an old man who was tired of living. Thinking of this, she leaned heavily on her crutch, and countless poisonous things appeared from the soles of her feet and attached to the surface of the spiritual boat. The speed of the spiritual boat was slightly improved. It should be known that the speed driven by the celestial stone had far exceeded that of Yuanying realm. It was not so easy to improve it again. Su Li looked at old Lady Duhua strangely, and the latter laughed. I can't compete with these rising stars in a fight, so I can only do a little bit. Su Li smiled. Grandma, you are modest. To be able to live to this age in the cultivation world, they really had some hidden skills. Huajin sect. Hua Yan's robe was stained with blood. Standing at the highest point of the main peak, she looked up at the nothingness with a dignified look. Behind her, the first elder, Li Guang, Yuan Shu, Bei Xiaoliang and others were still there. Elder Lv He of Yushu sect, who was responsible for protecting Bei Xiaoliang, had an abnormally pale face. Obviously, he was also injured. After 3 days of silence, seeing that Huajin sect had exhausted all its tricks, he sighed deeply and persuaded, Lord Hua, your big tactical matrix for protecting the sect is indeed very strong, but after the spiritual stones are exhausted, it becomes just a decoration. Now, why are you still insisting? Give up and go back to Yushu sect with the little holy boy. Only in this way can you save your life. Hua Yan shook her head speechlessly. This was the foundation she had worked hard for thousands of years. How could she give up so easily? Besides, it was not the time to give up yet. Her eyes were burning, and she looked into the distance. She had received Su Li's message. Being refused by Hua Yan again, Lv he was angry, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He said helplessly, Holy boy, please persuade her. At this time, what's the use of persisting? Will there be a miracle again? Bei Xiao Liang frowned and remained silent. 3 days ago, the 7th branch of Su family joined hands with Yu Wutao to fight. They were caught off guard and fought against the 4 practitioners in Yuaning realm. In a moment, they were all seriously injured and retreated. In the crisis, the headmaster immediately opened the 3rd layer of star-stacked tactical matrix, so they had time to breathe. But the consumption of the 3rd layer of star-stacked tactical matrix was extremely terrifying. In addition, there were always people attacking outside, so the consumption of spiritual stones doubled. In just 3 days, the inventory of Huajian sect was used up, and even the top-grade spiritual stones reserved by the headmaster for practice were used up. In such a desperate situation, he really couldn't figure out what trump card the headmaster had to turn the situation around. Was it that Grand Elder? Bei Xiao Liang showed sarcasm in his eyes. If there was such a Grand Elder, he must have escaped since he didn't come out to solve the crisis. Cowardly scoundrel! I should have brought my junior fellow apprentice's ancient sword. There might be a glimmer of hope. He snorted coldly and felt pity. During this time, he and Chi-Chen studied the ancient sword together and could use a trace of its power. But they also remembered what the mysterious female senior in the secret realm of shattered spirits said. Before the ancient sword was recast, they dared not take it out to show off. If it was leaked, not only their lives would be in danger, but also their master would be implicated. Therefore, they had been keeping it a secret and hid the ancient sword in the sect. They didn't even report it to their master, Mo Qin. A crack appeared in the sky shrouded by star-stacked tactical matrix, and then it spread around like a spider web. Hua Yan's pretty face changed slightly. She searched the universe ring, but couldn't take out any more spiritual stones. Even the inferior-grade spiritual stones are gone. She felt bitter in her heart. Seeing this scene, the disciples of the sect suddenly showed panic, packed up their things and fled the sect. 20% of the disciples fled 3 days ago, and now at least 30 to 40% have left. Even if we can survive, the strength of the sect is less than half of what it used to be. First Elder sighed helplessly, and his heart was bleeding. But the actual situation was much more serious than what he said. When the nest was overturned, there would always be eggs intact. It seemed that the defeat was inevitable, and no one would wait for death stupidly. When most of the outer branch disciples left, some of the outer branch disciples who had just joined the sect also left quietly. In the blink of an eye, 70% of the disciples left, leaving only 30% of the old disciples who had a strong sense of belonging to Huajian sect. It's over. First Elder felt dizzy. Even if they could survive today, it would be difficult for these hundreds of disciples to survive. Bei Xiao Liang was also gloomy. He didn't expect that he would see Huajian sect defeated with his own eyes when he came back this time, and he couldn't do anything to help. If he went back to get Hanfeng's sword, it would be too late. Headmaster Yuan Shu, who had been standing aside in silence for a long time, finally spoke. He bowed respectfully to Hua Yan with a complicated expression. The extinction of the sect is irreversible, and the headmaster is stubborn. But I still want to continue my cultivation path, so I have to leave now. As soon as this was said, First Elder was shocked and angry, and he blurted out, Yuan Shu, how dare you flee in the face of danger? Who saved you in the crisis? Without the headmaster, you would have been dead for hundreds of years. Hearing this, the complicated expression on Yuan Shu's face suddenly disappeared, and he sneered, It's just a piece of cake for the headmaster to save my life. I have worked hard in Huajian sect for so many years, and it's time to pay it off. Goodbye. After that, he rushed out of the tactical matrix for the protection of the sect on his sword, bowed to the people of Su family from a distance, and disappeared without a trace. Seeing Huajian sect falling apart, Yu Wutao felt very happy and couldn't help laughing. Immortal Hua, even if you were a talent in those days, what can you do in the face of this situation? Bastard! First Elder was so angry that his eyes turned red. He was about to chase out impulsively, but was stopped by Hua Yan with a cold face. Let him go. Chapter 399. As soon as the words came out, many old disciples who had been shaken showed shame on their faces. They kowtowed to Hua Yan 3 times and fled. The remaining 30% of the disciples were reduced again, leaving less than 20%. Hua Yan looked at the more than 100 people who were left in the square, and felt a little relieved. If she were to put herself in their shoes, if she were to encounter such a crisis without knowing anything, she might not have stayed either. These 100 people were completely gambling with their lives. "Headmaster, why do you?" First elder sighed and believed that Hua Yan was going to disband the sect. Hua Yan smiled and suddenly felt something. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Regardless of their talents, they will be the real core of Huajian's sect in the future." First elder was slightly stunned. Before he could respond, the cracking sound above his head was suddenly magnified. "Ah, Hua Yan, since you don't want to escape, then go to hell." Yu Wutao laughed wildly and punched at the center of the crack. The next moment, the light curtain broke like a mirror. The sky was full of flying fragments, reflecting the desperate faces of the disciples of Huajian's sect. Hua Yan's face turned cold. She flicked her sleeves and floated up. The universe ring between her fingers flashed with red light, and the blood-colored diamond stone, which had been repaired by Su Li, reappeared in her hand. Even if Su Li had said that this cup of bloodstone should not be used easily, she couldn't watch the remaining disciples of Huajian's sect die in vain. The 7th branch of Su family, who had been standing aside and watching coldly, felt frightened when they saw the blood-colored diamond stone in Hua Yan's hand. They were about to take action. Suddenly, whoosh! A flying sword shot over with terrifying power. Yu Wutao's face changed slightly, and he hurriedly stopped and took a step back. The flying sword happened to brush his face, run through him and Hua Yan, and stuck straight in the center of the empty square of Huajian's sect. Yu Wutao touched his face and looked gloomy when he saw his hands full of blood. "They are not friendly." Hua Yan put away the blood-colored diamond stone and breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at the nothingness where the flying sword came from with a smile on her face. Did they finally arrive? The Zihan sect and the Su family teamed up to bully a small sect. What an eye-opener! The sneer came from a distance. When Yu Wutao saw that the person was a scholar with a sallow face, he couldn't help but be shocked. After sensing that the latter's cultivation was only at Jindan realm, he was even more ashamed and angry. A junior in Jindan realm made him guard against him for a long time. If this matter was spread out, how could he live in Zihan's sect? "Ignorant child, how dare you interfere in my affairs? Die for me." When Yan Zai saw Yu Wutao taking the initiative to rush over, his eyes brightened. Instead of retreating, he advanced, laughing and fighting with Yu Wutao. Immortal Bingshu? Hua Yan was also surprised to see the person. Yuling's sect had always wanted to unify the 3 sections. Seeing that Huajian's sect was lonely, they should be happy. Why did they suddenly show up to help? Before she could figure out the situation, another charming voice came from the horizon, and 2 people appeared in the sky. One was a seductive woman, and the other looked like a child. His entire body was snow white, and his expression was cold. With a single glance, one could tell that the 2 of them were not simple characters. The pneuma of the 2 can't be guessed. Yuanying realm. When Su Lin, the head of the 7th branch of Su family, saw the people coming, his heart thumped, and he knew something was wrong. After thinking for a few seconds, he was about to step forward and clench his fists to test, but he saw that the 2 people in the air suddenly looked at him as if they were looking for prey. Then, without saying a word, they swooped down. "Oh no, let's fight together." Su Lin looked stern, and immediately called the 2 elders in Yuanying realm of Su family to fight together. But at this moment, Snow Child's lips hummed, and a clear word, "fix," echoed in the nothingness. "What? I can't move." Su Lin's pupils shrank in horror, and he could only watch the 2 elders fight. But at this time, Xian Meiji took a string of bells from her waist and shook them gently. The bewitching jingle sounded in the ears of the 2 elders. The 2 elders of Su family had no power to resist. They stopped like puppets without energy supply, and let Xian Meiji and Snow Child hit their chests with their palms respectively. They vomited blood and flew backward. You can't beat him. Su Lin was shocked. After struggling with all his strength for 3 seconds, he finally broke free from the spell of Snow Child. Without saying a word, he took the 2 elders to escape quickly, without looking at Yu Wutao. Just a very excellent daughter died. He had many children, and he could cultivate them again. He could never lose his life here. The old man ran away so fast. Xian Meiji, who couldn't catch up with him, pursed her mouth and said unhappily. Snow Child nodded and couldn't help but send a sound transmission. These 3 practitioners are too weak. They haven't even reached the level of Yuan. I don't know if our performances qualified in her eyes. Hearing Snow Child mention this, the pride in Xian Meiji's eyes immediately disappeared and was replaced with deep worry. Brother Yen is so lucky. That old guy can't run away. Snow Child turned to look at Yu Wutao, who was covered with blood and exhausted, and continued to send a sound transmission with envy. At this moment, Yu Wutao, who was mentioned by Snow Child, was indeed facing a life-and-death crisis, and the crisis came inexplicably, which made him confused. Boom! With the help of Yenzai's palm force, Yu Wutao spat blood again. His face was pale, and he could finally spare energy to speak. Fellow practitioner, wait a minute. Forgive me for my stupidity. We have no hatred or resentment. Why do we have to fight to the death? Yenzai shook off the blood on his flying sword, and with a smile on his sallow face, he replied, If I remember correctly, you were the one who wanted to take my life first. Since that's the case, why can't I kill you? Hearing this, Yu Wutao was so angry that he almost spat blood again. How could he know that the combat power of a practitioner in Jindan stage was even higher than his? He had no power to fight back in the hands of this person. It was terrible. After thinking quickly for a moment, seeing that Yenzai was about to fight again, he hurriedly stopped him. He couldn't hide the panic in his voice. Fellow practitioner, why do you do this? I am willing to compensate you to appease your frightened heart. How about it? Swish. A sword flashed across his neck as fast as lightning. The expression on Yu Wutao's face froze immediately. After a moment, his head was separated from his body, and blood rushed to the sky. Phew! When the flying sword returned to his hand, Yenzai casually put it into the universe ring, and said lightly, nothing. If he wasted any more time, the spiritual boat would arrive. If he hadn't solved everything by the time Su Li arrived, wouldn't he be very incompetent? Who are you pretending for? Xian Meiji rolled her eyes. Although Snow Child didn't speak, his eyes were twitching. In the Cave of Inheritance, why didn't he see that Yenzai was so sultry? On the top of the main peak below, everyone, including Hua Yan, was at a loss. Except for Hua Yan's speculation in her heart, no one knew what had happened. Seeing that Yu Wutao was simply beheaded, First Elder felt cold on his neck. He looked at Yenzai standing in the nothingness, and his eyes were full of horror. Amidst this strange and awkward atmosphere, a spirit boat covered in cuts and bruises finally sailed over slowly. Su Li, who had changed her face, stood at the bow of the boat and glanced at Yu Wutao's body on the ground. She flicked her fingers at Yenzai, and a white light shot over. Yenzai caught it subconsciously. He thought it would be the storage room for the reward, but he didn't expect it was just a jade slip, which didn't record any mental method, but a series of spiritual medicines with unfamiliar names. When he was wondering, Su Li's sound transmissions sounded in his ear. When these things are collected, the damage to your foundation will be recovered. It's up to you. Hearing this, Yenzai couldn't understand what it meant. He nodded fiercely while trembling slightly. How could he forget that this person's medical skills were absolutely at the level of a miracle-working doctor? How could a damage to the foundation be a problem for her? As for you two, Su Li turned her eyes and looked at Xian Meiji and Snow Child, who were staring at Yenzai enviously. They immediately lowered their heads in shame. Su Li looked at the 2 poor children and couldn't get angry. Her cold words became a little gentle, "Don't do it again." Xian Meiji and Snow Child's dim eyes lit up at the same time, and they nodded in unison. Hua Yan was still in a daze and almost said Su Li's name. Then she was awakened by Su Li's eyes. She immediately reacted and said, "Grand Elder, they are." Su Li glanced at Bei Xiao Liang, who was completely petrified, and shook her head. "Let's talk about this later." Li Guang. Li Guang, who was still absent-minded, was suddenly awakened by such a call. He said respectfully, "I'm here." Su Li pointed to the remaining disciples of the sect. "Now there are few disciples in the sect. Yuan Shu betrayed the sect, and Wang Yu has been executed by me. You are the only one who can take the position of Mount Head. Do you understand?" "What? Junior sister apprentice Wang is dead?" Li Guang was shocked and didn't know whether to be happy or sad for a while. Bei Xiao Liang was very surprised. Wang Yu didn't show up for a long time, and he had long suspected that she had escaped. He didn't expect that she had been executed by Su Li. This couldn't be better. She plotted against me. She only has herself to blame. Su Li said and glanced at Lv He meaningfully. Then she said no more and called Yen Zai and others into the hall. Only First Elder and Bei Xiao Liang were still standing on the peak. Seeing the whole scene, First Elder was stunned for a long time. Then he murmured, "It turns out that our Huajian sect really has a Grand Elder." When Su Li walked away, Lv He breathed a sigh of relief. He broke out in a cold sweat as if he had been fished out of the water. He couldn't see through Su Li, so he wanted to secretly use the secret method of Yushu sect to find out the real cultivation of this woman, but he still didn't sense anything. Not only that, but he was clearly discovered by that glance just now. Fortunately, the little holy boy has an old relationship with this sect. Otherwise, he would have offended. Lv He had a lingering fear. His strength was not much stronger than Yu Wutao's. With the protection of such a mysterious and powerful existence, even if all the members of Huajian sect die, it can definitely develop in a short time. The relationship between the little holy boy and this sect is absolutely beneficial and harmless. After the fear, Lv He thought happily in his heart. He didn't notice the indescribable complexity in Bei Xiao Liang's eyes. Chapter 400. What happened next was much calmer. Li Guang went down the mountain to reorganize the remaining disciples. In fact, there was nothing to reorganize. Although Grand Elder didn't take action personally, they also saw that there were several old monsters of Yuaning realm among the strong men who surrendered to Grand Elder. Grand Elder must be more unfathomable. With such thoughts, all the remaining disciples were full of hope for the future. They didn't feel dispirited at all, and soon devoted themselves to the passion of rebuilding the new sect. Yen Zai stayed for a while and left. Yuling's sect was completely under his control. Since he decided to follow Su Li, he was no longer obsessed with the identity of a headmaster. After he went back to reorganize Yuling's sect, it could be incorporated into the new Huajian sect. Old Lady Du Hua and Snow Child lived in Huajian sect, digesting the insights of the trip to Zhang Lei's cave. At this moment, in the hall of the main peak, Hua Yen dismissed the resentful First Elder and couldn't wait to ask, "Where did you get so many seniors of Yuaning realm? If they are willing to join Huajian sect, as long as the number of our disciples reaches a certain level, we can definitely rush to the top sects in Jiuzhou region, second only to the 25 sects." Su Li took a sip of the scented tea made by Hua Yen and smiled deeply. "My purpose is not only to join the top sections." Hua Yen was slightly shocked and blurted out, "What do you want to do?" Su Li shook her head. "It's too early to say now. As for those people, only old Lady Du Hua and immortal Bingshu can stay, and the two juniors don't count." As she said, Su Li mentioned a little about the origins of Snow Child and Xian Meiji. Hua Yen was shocked and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was more curious about how Su Li subdued the two arrogant talents. "It's no use thinking too much. I don't have much confidence. You will know it in the future, so it doesn't make much sense to say it now. You take these to heal first, and I'll go to check the tactical matrix." After Su Li said that, she threw a universe ring and turned to leave. Hua Yen was stunned for a moment. She stopped thinking and scanned the universe ring with her divine awareness. She saw that there were 300 celestial stones in it in addition to the healing ammunition. Su Li went down the mountain alone and went to the square where the disciples of the sect were before. Star-stacked tactical matrix is broken. What is broken is not the matrix core, but the center of the transformation of Wacken and the power of the tactical matrix. She vaguely remembers that it was set somewhere in the square. At this moment, the square had become empty. All the disciples had been taken back by Li Guang to Fujian Peak to heal. Although they did not participate in the previous battle, they were also affected. With a light snap, Su Li landed on the ground. Her cold eyes glanced over and her psychic awareness spread out. Soon, she found the place and went to the right. When she reached the edge of the square, she gently waved her left hand. The next moment, a red light flashed, and a rusty central device suddenly appeared and fell into her hand. Putting away the hub, Su Li suddenly said to herself, "Come out." Bei Xiao Liang, who was beside one of the pillars on the edge of the square, appeared awkwardly. He didn't expect that he could hide from Su Li's detection. After scratching his head, he directly walked over and bowed, saying, "Disciple Bei Xiao Liang pays respect to Grand Elder." Now the doubts in his heart had been completely solved. When they were in the secret realm of shattered spirits, Su Li treated him differently. She must have recognized that he used to be a disciple of Huajian sect. Su Li turned around and looked at Bei Xiao Liang up and down. She nodded gently and said, "It seems that you didn't slack off after you went back." "Grand Elder, you flatter me. My achievements are nothing." Bei Xiao Liang hurriedly replied, not daring to be arrogant. "You have a good understanding, so you don't need to belittle yourself." Su Li was speechless. She could see that Bei Xiao Liang's pneuma was smooth and flawless, and she seemed to have touched a trace of Taishu. After Yushu, it was Taishu. Yushu tactics was the famous practice method of Yushu sect, but the real Holy Sun and Holy Girl level task would be given the more ancient Taishu tactics. Yushu tactics was the simplified version of Taishu tactics. Only when Yushu tactics reached the consummation could it be possible to practice Taishu tactics. Thinking of this, Su Li looked up and seemed to see through everything. She saw He who was healing on Fujian Peak. The personal protection of a Yuanying realm is not something that my master can decide. It seems that this boy will be taught Taishu tactics soon, so I don't need to teach him privately to avoid trouble. Thinking of this, Su Li took out a carrier rune and handed it to Bei Xiao Liang. There was a trace of gentleness on her calm face. "You should know what to do. If you are wronged in Yushu sect, come back." Bei Xiao Liang took over the carrier rune as if he had received a treasure. He responded with tears in his eyes, "I understand." A few days later, Bei Xiao Liang left. With Su Li's words, he left with peace of mind. A few days later, Yan Zai merged the whole Yuling sect into Huajian sect. The number of people in the two sects was very different, and it was quite difficult to get along. Hua Yan soon came to Su Li and said with a smile, "Now, whether it is called Huajian sect or Yuling sect, some people are dissatisfied. You are the Grand Elder of our sect. Why don't you give the sect a new name?" "Anyway, I named Huajian sect casually. It's good for you to change it." "Should I?" Su Li opened her eyes, thought for a moment, and said softly, "Let's name it." The trajectory of her life was nothing more than going against the current. Whether she went against the mighty figures who controlled the chessboard or against the natural law, it was always the word, "and I." Hua Yan looked at Su Li in a daze. At this moment, the pneuma naturally exuded from her old friend made her a little sad. Yes, some justice. No matter how much she paid, she would get it back. "Good name." Hua Yan showed a big smile and turned to leave. As a result, the reputation of Ni sect spread quickly and quickly replaced Huajian sect and Yuling sect. Except for Meng sect, one of the three sects, who tried to figure out the meaning, it did not cause much trouble. New sects rose every day in Jiuzhou region, and it was common for a small sect to be established. In the next year, Ni sect gradually got on the right track. The difficult running in at the beginning finally paid off. After everyone accepted their new identity as disciples of Ni sect, Li Guang had less trouble. In the past year, Su Li did nothing but refine the celestial stone wholeheartedly. This was the first real closed-door practice since her reincarnation. Jean Ing was released from the nightmare and mixed into the disciples of Neiman Branch. A group of high-level people secretly looked after her, so her practice time was also smooth. Black, the nightmare, fell into a deep sleep. It seemed that the Dream Eater had entered the evolutionary stage. When it woke up, it should be able to help. One day, in the forbidden area of the back mountain of Ni sect, a violent fluctuation of spiritual power escaped. Even if there was a tactical matrix to block it, Hua Yen, who was outside, still felt frightened. It seemed that if a trace of spiritual power leaked out, she would be seriously injured. She stared at the blurred figure in the tactical matrix intently. She was so nervous and shocked that she had long been numb. 1 year was enough for her to accept the fact that Su Li was still in Lianqi realm. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never believe that there would be a practitioner in Lianqi realm whose strength was comparable to the peak of Yuanying realm in the world. In the tactical matrix, Su Li's state was not as dangerous as Hua Yen imagined. Instead, it was extremely comfortable. The 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Tut-tut, you also prepared nearly 1,000 Zhuji elixirs to transform genuine energy. Breaking through to Zhuji realm will be a piece of cake, and there will be no danger. Black Lotus ring emerged from Su Li's ring finger, and he was full of energy. In this year, he also absorbed a lot of celestial stones. Although he was not sure about the complete recovery of Black Lotus ring, his life as the spirit of Black Lotus ring was not so difficult after all. Su Li glanced at Black Lotus ring and did not speak. She focused on the pubic region. With the consumption of Zhuji elixirs, the outline of the foundation of the pubic region slowly appeared. Black Lotus had long been accustomed to Su Li's temperament, and his enthusiasm was not cold at all. He continued to shake his head and said, "In ancient times, there were many sayings about Zhuji realm. It was not as rough as you are now. If the talent is strong, the Zhuji platform can produce a vision and produce all kinds of incredible supernatural power." Su Li raised her eyes slightly. Just the ghost clan? She had never seen the supernatural power of any human clan. Of course not. Black Lotus cried out, his tone filled with disdain. All living beings in the world. Even if you human clan are born weak, you have a large number. There will always be a few outliers born. There are many evildoers with supernatural power. You haven't seen it because the practice methods of cultivation are too rubbish. Su Li pursed her lips. Black Lotus's words were a bit straightforward, but he was right. In his eyes, if the Qingshui circle was developed with the Qingshui circle in ancient times, it would be wiped out in less than 1 day. Was the gap too big? Su Li's eyes flashed, and she suddenly remembered the cage mentioned by immortal Song Lei. Could it be, hey, what are you thinking about? Even if you don't have to worry about the process of Zhuji realm, you should at least see what the shape of your foundation is. It is the first time for me to see a practitioner who is still distracted when breaking through. You are the first one. Black Lotus interrupted Su Li's thinking angrily. Su Li came back to her senses, restrained her thoughts, and smiled slightly. Well, even if her guess was right, what could he do with his meager strength now? Let's worry about the future in the future. Hurry up. Tell me if there is any abnormal phenomenon. You have the body of evil ghost, and you have practiced to the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. You are absolutely abnormal. If there is no abnormal phenomenon, I will look down on you. Su Li was not affected by Black Lotus, and she calmly looked at her pubic region. But this look still made her face a little strange. Haha, is it that the 12th grade Black Lotus gives birth to the abnormal phenomenon of the shadow of Black Phoenix? Black Lotus laughed and snorted. The phenomenon of Zhuji realm of each generation of the body of evil ghost is exactly the same. Now you know how powerful I am. How can this king's knowledge be something a mere junior like you can imagine? Su Li listened to the laughter coming from Black Lotus ring, and suddenly felt that Black Lotus was a little pitiful. However, she still couldn't help interrupting, "It doesn't seem to be." Ho, Black Lotus was like a drake being strangled, and he could no longer say a word. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.